Am I the asshole for telling my mom that she is the reason I don't want to have kids? A 22-year-old female, have a rocky relationship with my mom. She was extremely mentally and emotionally abusive during my teenage years, and we fought multiple times a day. I was under immense pressure to perform well in tennis and academics, and if my grades weren't perfect, I'd be screamed at and told I wasn't trying hard enough, even after being diagnosed with ADD, getting medication, and achieving straight A's. She weighed me weekly, scolded me if I gained weight, and sent me to fat camp multiple times. She even made me be a camp counselor to lose weight before college, and refused to pick me up when everyone else quit, leaving me to run the camp alone at only 19. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. During my freshman year of high school, I was close to my new tennis coach, who became a crucial male figure in my life. A year later, he was shot and killed. His death devastated me, but my mom refused to let me miss any school, saying, "High school is too important." When I became depressed, she accused me of being on drugs and threatened to drug test me, which was a huge blow since I'd never done drugs or alcohol. She did enroll me in group therapy at school, but she pulled me out when she realized I was missing classes for it. She told me, God took my coach away because I didn't appreciate him enough. Since then, I can't step into a church without breaking down, feeling like God hates me and took away someone I cared about. During fights, I often told her that once I left for college, I would cut her off completely. My dad encouraged me to write her a letter expressing how I felt, and in it I said I would never have kids because I didn't want them to be around her. Since then, she has made a big effort to mend our relationship, and recently things have improved between us. She still occasionally makes offhand remarks, and we do still fight sometimes when we're together, but it's night and day compared to before. Lately, my parents have started asking when I'm going to get married and have kids because they want to be grandparents. I haven't been in a relationship for over 3 years and am not currently dating. I told my mom I'm not sure I want kids, and she called me selfish. She said that she and my dad are devastated by the thought of not becoming grandparents and claimed it's not fair that I'm still punishing her for her past mistakes. She also asked how I plan to find a husband if I don't want children. While I initially said I didn't want kids to hurt my mom, I genuinely don't know if I want to have children. I know she has made a real effort to change, but I still feel some resentment toward her. Now, my mom is heartbroken over the possibility of never being a grandmother, and I feel guilty, especially because my dad is affected too, even though she has tried to make amends. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for not reacting properly to my friend group's surprise Airbnb booking? Context: every year, our friend group holds a Secret Santa event. A big part of the tradition involves booking an Airbnb where most of us, around 12 people, stay, though not everyone ends up sleeping there. We usually spend a few hours on Discord together searching for Airbnbs that meet our needs, considering things like location, capacity, and budget, and bookmark options for further review. This year, we followed the usual process as a group, spending hours looking through listings and saving potential options. Then 2 weeks ago, half of the group, let's call them Group B, suddenly went silent on Discord for an entire week, leaving the rest of us, Group A, confused and wondering why they'd stopped communicating. A few days later, the main planner from Group B, who typically leads our event coordination, announced that he'd booked a surprise Airbnb within budget and in a great area. Group A appreciated the effort but requested some basic details, wanting at least a general sense of the place. However, the planner refused, just saying, "Trust me," and informing us that we'd each need to contribute $60. As days went by, Group A became more uneasy about paying for an unknown Airbnb. Then a friend close to some members of Group B, let's call him Jay, shared that the planner had recently purchased a house that Group B would be moving into. We acknowledged that this was impressive, but were still confused as to why Group B insisted it was an Airbnb and why we were being asked to pay $60 each for it. Group A tried to get confirmation from Group B, but they continued to insist on keeping it a surprise until the last minute. According to Jay, part of the surprise was that we wouldn't actually need to pay anything as the planner owned the house. Last night, Group B finally revealed that they bought a new house and planned to use it as the location for our Secret Santa event. Group A was not thrilled about the secrecy and the expectation that we'd contribute to what we thought was an Airbnb rental, only to find out it was actually Group B's new home. Group B is upset with us, saying that we acted like babies for not being more supportive of their efforts, and for reacting in an annoyed manner. Am I the asshole for making them feel disappointed in us by reacting this way? Am I the asshole for not reacting properly to my friend group's surprise Airbnb booking? Context: every year, our friend group hosts a Secret Santa event. A significant part of this tradition involves booking an Airbnb where most of us, around 12 people, plan to stay, though not everyone ends up sleeping there. Typically, we spend a few hours on Discord searching for Airbnbs that meet our criteria, location, capacity, budget, etc., and bookmark options for further review. This year, our entire group followed the usual process, spending hours searching listings and bookmarking potential choices to revisit later. Then about 2 weeks ago, half of the group, let's call them Group B, suddenly stopped communicating with us, Group A, and went completely silent on Discord for an entire week. This abrupt change left Group A confused, prompting us to ask questions about what was going on and why Group B had stopped communicating with us. A few days later, Group B's main planner, the person who typically leads our event coordination, announced that he had booked a surprise Airbnb that was within budget and located in a great area. While Group A appreciated the effort, we requested more details, wanting at least some basic information about the place. However, the planner refused to provide any specifics, repeatedly responding with "trust me," and informing us that each participant would need to contribute $60. More details on that later. As days passed, Group A grew increasingly confused and uneasy about this Airbnb, which we were expected to help pay for, without any assurance or photos of what we were actually funding. Then a friend close to some members of Group B, we'll call him Jay, let us know that the planner had recently purchased a house where everyone in Group B would be moving in. While we recognized this as an impressive feat for Group B, we were still confused by their continued insistence on presenting it as an Airbnb that we needed to contribute $60 per person toward. With this information, Group A tried to get confirmation from Group B, but they wouldn't budge, even as the Secret Santa event came closer. Jay also told us that part of the so-called surprise was that we wouldn't actually need to pay anything, since the planner owned the house. Finally, last night, Group B revealed the truth. They had moved into a newly acquired house, and it would be the location for our Secret Santa event. Group A wasn't thrilled about the week of lies and secrecy over something we had initially believed was an Airbnb we were expected to fund. Group B is unhappy with us, claiming that we acted immaturely by not being more supportive of their actions in getting this house for our event. Am I the asshole for making them feel disappointed in us by reacting in a disgruntled and annoyed manner? Am I the asshole for refusing to make calls to social services on my girlfriend's behalf? My 30-year-old male partner, 29-year-old female, has phone anxiety and executive dysfunction. Because of this, I often have to manage things like bills and coordinating repairs, and I've more or less accepted that responsibility. Without disclosing our location, she's been unemployed for nearly 2 years and has been on social services payments during this time. I've been, and still am, working full-time. She has a fair amount of savings from her previous job, and we currently live with my parents, so we don't have many household expenses at the moment. Though of course her income is limited. Recently, we went on an extended vacation, and before we left, I told her to notify social services about her absence so they could pause her payments while she was out of the country. 4 weeks into the trip, she missed an international call from them, and afterward, received a notification saying she now owes them money. Obviously, she hadn't informed them before we left. I didn't scold her as that wouldn't help, but I suggested she take care of it when we returned. Now 2 weeks after getting back, she came to me while I was working from home, saying she was too anxious to call them and sort it out. I offered to be there on hold with her since I needed to keep working. She then asked if I could make the call myself during my lunch break. I declined, as these calls often take an extremely long time, likely extending beyond my break and into my work hours. She's now calling me selfish and says I'm the asshole for refusing. Later, I asked if she had made the call and she responded, "Why does it matter to you?" Additional context *, I'm currently in therapy for several personal issues. She's on the spectrum and hasn't been to therapy in years, though I've encouraged her to resume. She says the cost is prohibitive, and to be fair, it's quite expensive. When we go to couples therapy, I'm also the one who covers the expense. The social services line is only open during standard work hours. While my workload varies, I can get client calls unexpectedly, so I'm expected to be available and responsive during work hours. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for getting upset with my boyfriend when he ate the last of my food while I was in the bathroom? My boyfriend, who is 24 years old, and I, also 24, went to a restaurant together for only our second time eating out. This week has been really rough at work, so I asked him to go out for a meal, telling him I needed a pick-me-up. I mentioned that I wasn't super hungry since I had already eaten a bit earlier, but I was really looking forward to having some dumplings and soup. I even talked about how excited I was for the dumplings during the drive to the restaurant. When we ordered, I made it clear that I only wanted 4 dumplings and some soup. My boyfriend ordered 2 large main courses for himself, as he has a bigger appetite. When the food arrived, I shared my soup with him and took a bite of his food, but I was mostly focused on my dumplings. When my dumplings arrived, I ate one before I had to run to the bathroom. When I got back, I saw that he had eaten both of the remaining dumplings. I was really upset because I had been looking forward to those dumplings and only got to eat one. I told him how disappointed I was and called him selfish, saying he never thinks of me. I even asked him to pay for what he ate since I had specifically ordered those dumplings for myself. I don't want to make this a huge deal, but I feel like he should have asked before just taking them, especially since I had clearly expressed how excited I was for them. Am I the asshole for getting upset, calling him selfish and asking him to pay more? Am I the asshole for not waking up my roommate on the day of his final med school exam? I am a 23-year-old man and my roommate Justin, also 23, and I are med students. We've been roommates for 2 years, living together in a hostel. Last week was our final year exams and it was brutal. We were surviving on just 2 to 3 hours of sleep each day, running on coffee and energy drinks. I know it's not healthy, but there was no other way to get through it, honestly. On the last day of exams, Justin was especially exhausted. Around 1 a.m., he decided to get some sleep and asked me to wake him up at 3 a.m. I agreed. However, by 2:30 a.m. I was completely drained. My brain was shutting down, my notes were becoming blurry, and I knew that if I stayed up any longer I'd probably just pass out. So, I decided to wake Justin up a bit early. I woke Justin up at 2:30 a.m., told him the time, and suggested he set an alarm so he wouldn't oversleep. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, nodded, and said, "All right." I reminded him, "Don't forget to set an alarm," and then almost instantly I fell asleep. We both ended up waking up at 8 a.m. I had set my alarm for 6 a.m., but I kept hitting snooze. Justin panicked, accusing me of not waking him up as I had promised. I reminded him that I did wake him up at 2:30 a.m. and suggested he set an alarm. Justin argued that he was too sleepy to fully understand what was happening and insisted that I should have stayed awake to wake him at 3 a.m. or, at the very least, made sure he was fully alert before going to sleep myself. Justin's exam didn't go well and now he's blaming me. I understand his frustration, but I think he's being unfair. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for not covering the bill for my friends? I am a 20-year-old woman, and recently I met up with 3 of my high school friends, also 20-year-old women, for dinner. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and while it wasn't my idea to meet up, I was invited and was really excited since it had been a year since the 4 of us were all together. When the check came to the table, it wasn't split. We never discussed splitting it, and our waiter just dropped it off in passing. My friends started making comments about being in school or out of work, insinuating that I should be the one to pay. 2 of them are full-time college students with work-study jobs, and the third works full-time but is currently between jobs. I work full-time as a night registered nurse, which I started in June. I was a little taken aback since no one had mentioned that I'd be expected to cover the entire bill, which was about $90 before tip. I told them I'd pay for my own meal and cover the tip, but I wanted them to Venmo me the cost of what they had ordered. They seemed offended, gave me a few side eyes, but reluctantly agreed. They continued to make comments about how I had a big girl job and could have covered the bill easily, calling me selfish for asking them to pay me back. I told them it was rude to expect me to pay without suggesting it beforehand and that I didn't think I was being selfish. This happened a couple of weeks ago, and they've since made jokes and remarks in our group chat about the incident. I know that at least one of them is actually upset with me about it. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole if I change my wedding RSVP after having my +1 rescinded? I have a friend from college who is getting married in 2.5 weeks. I received the invitation just a week ago, and the invite included a QR code that directed me to their wedding website on the knot. The wedding is on a Friday, which is very last minute, and I'll need to take time off work to attend. I'm friends with the bride from college and we have one mutual friend who is also invited. However, our mutual friend isn't able to attend, so I won't know anyone at the wedding except for the bride. When I went to RSVP on the knot, it gave me the option to add a +1. I've never seen this option before without specifically being offered a +1, so I assumed I was allowed to bring someone. I'm not in a long-term relationship, but since I won't know anyone else at the wedding, I asked my friend to attend with me and added her as my +1 in the RSVP. A few days later I received a text from the bride telling me that I don't have a +1 and shouldn't have added my friend. She said I can't bring her and still wants me to come, encouraging me to make friends with other guests, even though I won't know anyone. I'm guessing the bride and groom may have mistakenly allowed me a +1 in the RSVP system, but she didn't apologize or clarify any misunderstanding. She just told me I shouldn't have added anyone. I have pretty significant social anxiety and now feel very nervous about attending the wedding alone. I get very uncomfortable in situations where I don't know anyone, and I'm now reconsidering using my paid time off to attend a last-minute wedding where I'll be completely on my own. Am I the asshole if I change my RSVP to no, since I won't know anyone at the event? I feel conflicted because I technically said I was available when I RSVP'd yes, but it was on the assumption that I'd be able to bring someone along to keep me company. Am I the asshole for laughing and saying, what goes around comes around because my uncle's daughter is hanging out with boys just like he was? Following my 16-year-old Uncle Tommy's own definition of whores, Tommy was the biggest whore back in the day. He used to mess around with multiple girls at once, chasing them everywhere like a dog or something. My mom and aunts would constantly tell Tommy it was wrong, but he didn't care, and my grandma thought it was cute and even encouraged him. Fast forward to now, and Tommy is furious because my cousin Mariah, who's 14, is talking to boys who are exactly like he was. Tommy has been arguing with Mariah's mom, Sophia, because Mariah is spending time with these boys and texting them instead of focusing on her schoolwork. Tommy even got grandma involved, and now both of them are blaming Sophia for who Mariah is talking to. The other day, grandma was over at our house, talking about how worried she and Tommy are about Mariah. I couldn't hold back and started laughing. Grandma told me it wasn't funny and that Mariah shouldn't be behaving this way or hanging around with skirt chasers. I responded, what goes around comes around, and basically told her that it's karma. Tommy used to be a skirt chaser himself, and now he's dealing with his own daughter hanging out with boys just like he was. Grandma got so mad that she left early, which she never does. My mom and 2 of my aunts were there as well, and all 3 of them agreed that what I said was funny and technically true. But they also said that I'm old enough to know this is one of those things you laugh about privately, not to their faces. They pointed out it's something an adult should discuss seriously, not something to bring up as a joke. I know they're probably right, but still, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for laughing at my sister's relationship troubles? I'm a 28-year-old woman and I have a younger sister, Emily, who's 25. She was with her high school sweetheart, Jake, from the time she was 14. They dated all through high school and college, and honestly they were the perfect couple. Jake was incredibly thoughtful. He would surprise her with gifts, plan elaborate dates, and he genuinely seemed to light up whenever she was around. They even talked about getting married. Fast forward to a few months ago, Emily cheated on Jake and ended the relationship to be with her affair partner, Mark. Since then, she's been complaining to me about how Mark doesn't do any of the romantic things Jake used to do. Apparently, Mark doesn't surprise her with gifts, and their dates feel pretty lackluster compared to the relationship she had with Jake. Last week, while I was on the phone with her, she started venting about how unsatisfied she feels in her new relationship. I don't know what came over me, but I just burst out laughing. I mean, she cheated on the guy who treated her like a queen, and now she's complaining that the new guy isn't measuring up? It just felt so absurd to me. Emily got really upset and told me I was being insensitive. I tried to explain that I wasn't laughing at her pain, but that it felt like poetic justice considering how she treated Jake. Now she's barely speaking to me and I'm starting to feel guilty. Am I the asshole for laughing at my sister's relationship troubles after she cheated on someone who treated her so well? Am I the asshole for telling my best friend that I am pregnant? I'm a 33-year-old woman and I've been very close friends with N, 31, for about 8 years. We've gone through a lot together, and over the past year and a half, I've been by her side for her infertility journey. She has been through 2 inseminations and 2 rounds of IVF, all without success. She has PCOS and doesn't ovulate naturally. My partner and I started trying for a baby around the same time she did, and in the past I asked if she would want to know if I got pregnant. She told me I could tell her. A couple of months ago, her 2nd round of IVF failed, and she was understandably devastated. She mentioned that she didn't want to talk about pregnancies when we met up, so we avoided the topic. At that time, I already knew I was pregnant, but I respected her wishes and didn't say anything. 2 weeks later, she called and told me her doctors had discovered a possible reason for why IVF wasn't working. She was undergoing treatment for an infection and was hopeful she could try again in a month. I was excited for her and supportive. Since she had brought up the topic of her treatment again, I decided that I would tell her I was pregnant when we met in person. I was already 10 weeks along and planned to announce it publicly soon, so I wanted her to hear it directly from me. When we met up, we chatted about her for a bit and then I shared my news. Her reaction was cold and she only said, "Oh, congratulations then," followed by, "That was fast, huh?" I was a bit taken aback but gave her grace given her situation. Although I had hoped she would be happy for me, I understood and decided to give her time and space, so we didn't talk again for a month. A month later, I reached out to ask about an exam she had at work. She replied with a 4-minute audio message, telling me she was offended that I had told her about my pregnancy when she had specifically asked not to talk about that topic. She said she didn't want to hear the news from me and didn't want to see me for a while. Was shocked and explained that she had reopened the topic by discussing her treatment and that I thought she would be optimistic about the new discoveries. I also felt hurt by her setting the terms for when and how we could be friends. It's been a month since then and we haven't spoken. I think about her and worry for her, but I also feel hurt that she doesn't want to be part of my life or my baby's life. I'm not sure if this friendship would be healthy if she does want to reconnect. So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my friend we don't want his wife to join us? I just scored some awesome concert tickets. A friend of mine, both of us are male, and I have been going to a few concerts a year for a while now. We don't go to sporting events and concerts are kind of our thing for entertainment. I bought 3 tickets today. It's a big deal for us as we love this type of show and I managed to get us great seats. The 3rd ticket is intended for another friend. Friend number 3 has had a really tough year taking care of his wife and kids. His wife was diagnosed with a rare disease, likely more from her major drinking problem than genetics. It's still somewhat of a mystery how and why, but she was really struggling all year, hardly able to help with the kids and no contribution to bills or chores. She's doing a lot better now but still has no job and doesn't contribute much. Everyone feels bad for him because he's a genuinely good guy and tries incredibly hard. So, I got him a ticket and invited him along thinking he could use a break to get away from the responsibilities and enjoy the show. He was super excited and agreed to join. Later today he tells me he got permission from his wife to go, but she also wants to join us. Besides her health issues, she's quite loud and not exactly easygoing. Plus, I only have 3 tickets. Am I the asshole for telling him it's a guy's night and potentially putting him in the difficult position of explaining to her that we don't want her to come? Am I the asshole for telling my friends I can't afford to split holiday costs equally and that I'll only pay for the activities I can budget for? A few friends and I are planning a holiday trip together. We've been talking about all the activities we want to do, but some of the options are really expensive like fancy dinners and guided tours. Since my budget is a lot tighter than theirs, I told them that I'd love to join but would only be able to pay for the activities that fit within my budget rather than splitting all costs equally. This didn't go over well with a couple of friends. They feel that splitting everything equally is just what friends do, and that it's awkward if I go off to do my own thing for cheaper options while they stick to the pricier plans. One friend even said that if I'm not willing to split everything evenly, I should reconsider going on the trip. Now I'm wondering if I've been unreasonable by setting a boundary about what I can afford. Am I the asshole for telling my friends I won't be able to split all costs equally? Would I be the asshole for buying a fridge and refusing to let my roommate and his girlfriend use it, even though they'd have no other way to keep their food fresh? I, 26M, live with my roommate, 33M, who is also my coworker. We initially moved in together to share the cost of rent and groceries, and we had planned to buy a fridge together. However, when his girlfriend, 28F, moved in about 5 months ago, the dynamic changed and that conversation was dropped. Now we each buy our own groceries and kitchen supplies, including separate toiletries and even toilet paper. I feel like a third wheel in my own home, and I no longer enjoy the convenience of sharing space with my roommate. I wanted a communal living situation, but it has become more like separate lives. Currently, I don't have a fridge and I'm thinking about buying one, especially since holiday sales are coming up. However, my roommate is unwilling to contribute to the cost, and I'm concerned about sharing it with them since they seem to want everything separate now. When we both get home from work, his girlfriend is usually in the kitchen cooking, and I have to wait an hour or two to use the space. I've suggested she cook earlier so I can use the kitchen, but my roommate prefers not to eat cold food. This situation has made me rely on takeout, which feels wasteful and affects my groceries as my fresh food often goes bad. The bathroom situation is also frustrating. I handle cleaning it properly using detergent and bleach, while they only mop with water. If cleaning supplies run out, I end up replacing them, even if it means living with a dirty bathroom until I can afford more. This makes me worried about how they would maintain a fridge if I shared one with them, especially since their version of cleaning the kitchen is just doing the dishes and putting them away. I've tried discussing house rules and boundaries with my roommate, but he believes we should mind our own business as long as the rent is paid. I don't feel comfortable addressing his girlfriend directly, as I've noticed my roommate tends to side with her in conflicts. This makes it awkward for me to assert my needs. My coworkers have said I would be the asshole if I bought a fridge and didn't share it with them, which adds to my confusion about what the right thing to do is. Considering everything, I'm thinking of buying my own fridge. Would I be the asshole if I didn't share it with them, especially given that they seem to want everything separate? Am I the asshole for telling my husband to return a puppy? My husband and I are in our mid-40s and have been married for 15 years with 2 kids, ages 14 and 11. A couple of years ago, our senior dog passed away. Since then, we've talked about getting another dog, but we agreed it would be better to wait until the kids graduate high school. Dogs are a huge commitment and I don't have time. Between the kids' activities 7 nights a week and working 2 jobs, 50 hours a week, I'm stretched thin. My husband works full-time too, but he works from home 3 days a week. Yesterday, I came home to a surprise. A puppy. I was really angry because I had made it clear that I didn't want another dog right now. The kids were excited, but I felt blindsided. He said it was my birthday gift, but I pushed back, saying that getting a dog is a family decision and I felt disrespected. He flew into a rage, threatened separation, and spent the night elsewhere. When he came home today, I apologized for suggesting that he got the dog because he wanted it, instead of it being a heartfelt gift. But I told him he needed to return the dog. He mentioned separation again and said I treat him like shit. Am I the asshole for insisting he return the puppy? Am I the asshole for missing another big moment for my half-siblings? My dad has been inconsistent about being in my life. He and my mom divorced when I was 1 and he bailed right after I was born. He came back when I was 8 months old, but my mom let him stay only for a month before realizing he wasn't serious about being a family with us. He just used her for a place to stay. When she refused to let him stay longer, he bailed again. He was briefly in my life from ages 3 to 4, then disappeared again. When I was 8, he came back for a few months, but that ended too. He showed up twice when I was 10 but wasn't involved after that. I also found out this summer that he didn't really pay child support. There was some money given for me, but it was probably less than $400 over the last 16 years. At 13 he moved here for good, or so he says. He was married again and had kids with his wife. He started visiting me again and eventually I was required to spend every other weekend at his house, though I didn't want to. I even spoke to a judge about my wishes, but the judge said it was in my best interest to have a relationship with my family. I don't like being at his house. I only sleep in the bed assigned to me, and I don't take anything I care about or personalize the room in any way. Here's the thing. My dad and his wife encourage their kids to spend time with me and engage with me. They like having me there and they've told me they wish I'd spend more time with them. The kids did nothing wrong, but I don't want to focus on building a relationship with them. I don't feel any connection to them, but I'm expected to be there for the big moments in their lives. This expectation comes not only from my dad and his wife but also from my dad's parents, who I don't really know outside of the time I spent with my dad. They all expect me to take my role as a brother seriously, which I think is crazy since I don't have much of a relationship with them. If it's not one of my dad's weekends with me, I tend to miss the big events in their lives, and I don't make an effort to attend. Recently, I was invited to go trick-or-treating with them on Halloween. I said no and they really pushed for me to come. I didn't, and after that I received so many texts from my dad's phone and numbers I assumed belonged to his wife and his parents, telling me I was shitty for missing another big moment for my half-siblings. I ended up blocking the other numbers, but my dad's still texting me about it. Am I the asshole for not participating in these events and missing important moments in my half-siblings' lives? Am I the asshole for telling my house guests they need to leave over mental health issues? I, 31F, had a friend, 32F, from university reach out to me, asking if she and her sister, 25F, could stay at my place during their trip to the country where I now live, before they headed to other cities. I didn't have any issues with this arrangement, so I agreed. They flew over and were expected to stay at my place for a week. I live in the heart of a major tourist city. What I didn't know beforehand was that her sister has serious anxiety issues related to dogs. Neither my friend nor her sister seemed aware of the different regulations around dogs in this country. Here, malls, restaurants, bakeries, bars, and pubs are almost always dog-friendly, welcoming pets everywhere except for grocery stores. On their first day here, I took them out for a walk, and her sister became visibly upset when she saw dogs walking freely around the city with their owners, off and off-leash. She started getting really hysterical when we went inside a Starbucks, and she saw dogs inside, sitting by their owners' feet. We immediately returned home and I explained that it's impossible to avoid dogs in this city since they're commonly out and about. Her sister then told me she didn't want to leave my place at all because of these unpredictable dogs and preferred to stay indoors for the entire trip. I suggested that the places they're planning to visit next would likely have similar regulations and dog-friendly environments. At this point, her sister announced that they'd just stay at my place for a few more weeks before flying home, as she didn't feel comfortable going out. I told them I wasn't okay with this and that if her anxiety around dogs was truly that severe, they'd need to make other arrangements. Am I the asshole for asking them to leave after this unexpected change in circumstances? Am I the asshole for requesting that my teacher not partner me with my deadbeat father's daughter? My father walked out on my mom when she was pregnant with me, 16M. They'd been married for about 5 years, but he was cheating a lot. Mom had a tough time trying to divorce him because they had just moved and he was difficult to track down. He never met me and didn't show up at court for their divorce, custody hearings, or for child support proceedings. He even went to jail 3 times for failure to pay child support and trying to avoid it by quitting jobs and not disclosing his new employment. I still haven't met him, but about a year ago he moved back with his family, his affair partner and their kids. He has a daughter who's about 5 months younger than me, a son about a year and a half younger, and some younger kids whose ages I don't know. I only know the older two's ages because of school and sharing some classes with his daughter. She's tried to connect with me, but I told her I wasn't interested. To me, we're not family and I don't want to get involved with his affair family. She was visibly upset and cried a bit in front of me, but she didn't give up. When school started in August, she was suddenly in 4 of my classes instead of just 1 like last year. So I went to our teacher, who assigns a lot of group work, and asked her not to pair me with her. I explained the situation, and the teacher was surprised but agreed it would be best to avoid any potential hostility during group projects, especially when other students are involved. Twice now, she's tried to pair up with me or include me in her group. The first time she tried to be my solo partner, and the second time she tried to include me in a larger group. Both times our teacher refused. This made her realize what I'd done. She told her parents, who went to the principal and demanded a meeting with me and my mom. Mom went but didn't include me, explaining to the principal that she didn't think the first time I should meet my father would be when he's berating me for not working with his daughter. They tried to claim that I was bullying their daughter and suggested I should be either suspended or forced to make it up to her through some sort of buddy program. The principal didn't take their complaint seriously, but now both his daughter and son have been staring at me more at school since the meeting. A couple of her friends even said I was a jerk for embarrassing her and refusing to get to know her. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for not leaving my estate to my severely disabled brother? I, 33F, received a terminal diagnosis earlier this year. I have a couple of years at best to get everything in order before I won't have the cognitive ability to do so anymore. I've been working with a lawyer and an end-of-life care social worker to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible and that my wishes are respected. My family situation is complicated. My parents were never married and my dad passed away from the same condition I now have when I was 12. He never remarried, so his assets were put in a trust for me by my grandparents. My mom married after they broke up and had my half-brother, 26M, who is severely mentally disabled. He has the cognitive level of a 7-year-old in an adult's body, and he's very challenging to care for, even with all the resources they have. My mom and stepdad struggle financially, and they tried hard to get control of my trust while I lived with them, but they couldn't. I occasionally help them out financially, but it feels like my mom treats me as an emergency fund rather than as her daughter. My stepdad has always been bitter about the financial aspect, especially since my dad's family is well off. I don't share much about my life with them because they often get passive-aggressive and guilt-trippy. Now that I know I'm on borrowed time, I've been trying to talk more with my mom. We've never had a great relationship, but I wanted to try to resolve some issues. Since my diagnosis, she's been nicer and more concerned, so I thought it was okay to open up a bit. I didn't want her to be blindsided or feel obligated to take on anything, as I've appointed another family member to handle my medical and financial power of attorney. I explained that I'd arranged for my own care so she wouldn't feel burdened, and she was thankful for that. But then, she brought up how she had always hoped I'd be the one to ensure my brother was taken care of after she was gone and assumed that, in a way, I still would be. She suggested that whatever I leave behind could go into his care fund, and she'd make sure he knew it was from his big sister. Here's where I might be the asshole. I'm not leaving anything to my mom or my brother. I don't have kids, but I've been the favorite auntie to my best friend's 2 children for their entire lives. They are the light of my life and I spend a lot of time with them. My best friend and I have been through a lot together. She and her husband have been the ones going with me to appointments and letting me stay with them when I was too sick for meds to be home alone. I plan to leave whatever remains of my estate to her kids for college. I know the money could help secure better care for my half-brother and relieve some of my mom's burden, but I feel I want to help someone else now. Edit. Thank you for the kind messages. To answer a few questions. A. I'm not close to my half-brother at all. I didn't meet him until my dad passed, and the 6 years I lived around him were challenging and sometimes frightening. I haven't seen him in person in 15 years. I doubt he even understands that he has a sister, or what that would mean. I care about his welfare as much as I would any other mentally disabled person, but I don't feel a familial bond just because we share DNA. I've already contributed a fair amount to help my mom stay solvent to care for him, so one could argue he's already benefited significantly. As much as my mom may wish it, I would never have taken on legal responsibility for him after her passing. His father's family could step in if they chose. B. I am working with a strong team to get things in order. My estate lawyer and financial advisor are prepared to lock everything down once I finalize my decisions about my assets. I trust my executor, so the logistics and legal planning are under control. I just need to make a few hard decisions. Reflecting on some of the responses, I'm considering closing the chapter on my relationship with my mom and her family. I've always hoped that she cared in her own way and that our relationship could improve, but I'm not sure I want to spend what time I have left chasing that. The social worker offered to set up family sessions with a counselor specializing in terminal family issues, so I may let that be my guide. Am I the asshole for making a woman lose a costume contest? I'm the events chair of my fraternity this semester, and I organized our Halloween party, which took place yesterday. Every year we host a big costume contest. It costs $5 to enter and the winner takes the pot. With around 30 to 50 entries each year, the prize is pretty significant. This year we had 40 people enter with about 160 people attending. In the past, there's been one girl who always wins. A lot of my fraternity brothers have a thing for her. Her costumes are usually the typical sorority girl style: a short skirt, boots, fishnet leggings, a bra or corset, and some animal ears with light face paint. Now, I'll admit my costume wasn't that creative either, just angel wings, white shorts, and a halo, so I get that people dress to look good more than for originality. But I figured that even though she looked great, the contest should be about creativity, not just who looks hottest. For the contest, she dressed as a bee, similar to her usual, with a short skirt and a revealing top. When the votes came in, she won by one vote, but I hadn't voted yet. I cast my vote, and my vice chairman agreed with me and voted too, which put her in second place. When I announced the results, she was visibly upset. She's won the last 4 years, so this was a shock for her. Later, one of my fraternity brothers, who was upset about it, told her I intentionally voted against her because I didn't like her, which isn't true. I'm honestly neutral about her. She confronted me, accused me of having a problem with her, and we argued. I told her it wasn't a contest for the sluttiest costume, but for the best costume, and she should be glad we created a runner-up prize of $50 for her. We ended up getting separated after the argument. Now, several of my fraternity brothers are mad at me for upsetting her. Am I the asshole for not inviting my best friend's boyfriend to my 6 years clear of cancer celebration? I'm a 19-year-old guy, and when I was 12 I went through cancer. During that tough time, my best friend, also 19, was incredibly supportive. She was always by my side, messaging me during my chemotherapy treatments and making sure I was okay. When I returned to school after treatment, I joined a drama club. Unfortunately, there was one guy in the club who was incredibly homophobic towards me. I'd recently come out to my closest friends and word got around, which I was okay with. But this guy used it as an excuse to bully me. He said awful things, telling me I should leave the school because no one would want to talk to me, and even made hurtful comments about my cancer, saying things like, "It should have taken your life, and it's a shame you beat it." Fast forward to now, I'm celebrating 6 years of being cancer-free. We have a celebratory meal each year, and it's usually just me, my family, my boyfriend, 22, whom I've been with for almost 2 years, and my closest friends. My best friend started dating someone 5 months ago, and it turned out to be the same guy who bullied me in high school. She seemed really happy with him and insisted he had changed, so I decided to give him another chance. Although he and I still don't get along, I haven't interfered in their relationship because I want her to be happy. A few days ago, she asked if he could join the celebration meal. I was hesitant and explained that, while I'm happy for her, I can't forgive him for the awful things he said to me. Just a month ago, he made some snide remarks about me and my boyfriend to a mutual friend, so I don't feel like he's changed. Now, my friend is calling me childish and insists I should just forget about it. She even said that if he can't come, she won't attend either. I'm torn. I don't know if I should let him join to keep the peace or stand by my decision and face the possibility of her not coming. So, am I the asshole for not inviting him and denying my friend's request? Am I the asshole for asking my landlady to pay for the ice cream her grandchildren ate and the notebook they tore? For some context, I'm a student in my final year and living off my savings, so I don't have much money. I rent a room near my university from a lady who also rents out rooms to 2 other university students, so it's typically just adults in the house. Recently, my landlady's grandchildren have been visiting. There are 3 kids between the ages of 2 and 7. Normally, we leave our doors open around the house because it's just us adults and we all trust each other. But with the kids running around, I started keeping my door closed, though not locked. One afternoon, I came back to my room feeling that something was off, as though someone had been there and tried to put things back as they were. I was a bit nervous, so I asked my best friend, who rents another room, if he'd come in, but he said no. Then I noticed a bookmark on the floor. When I went to check in the kitchen, I found my special notebook, a birthday gift from my best friend a few years ago with a cute cat design, under a table. It was dirty, torn, and unusable. The landlady saw me almost crying. Stationery and gifts are special to me, and she offered to pay for a new one, but unfortunately that one is discontinued. Later, I decided to relax with some ice cream, which was a treat since my mom had sent me some extra money. But when I opened the freezer, I saw that the kids had eaten all of it, about a liter. The landlady doesn't know about the ice cream yet, but today I want to ask her to cover the cost of both the notebook and the ice cream. I feel conflicted because I don't want to seem rude, but I don't have a lot of extra money, and having my things eaten and broken has left me feeling very frustrated. I've now started locking my door. Update: it went well. I talked to her and she was understanding. She even asked if I'd found a replacement for the notebook. She also gave me a plate of homemade food, which is honestly a lifesaver as a student. I appreciate everyone's advice. I felt hesitant about asking, because I have a soft spot for kids. Regarding privacy, we've discussed it, and she assured me the kids were scolded and warned not to enter other rooms. Luckily, I didn't have anything dangerous at their reach. Am I the asshole for allowing my daughter to use the bathroom before my partner showers after work? Let me set the scene. It's 6 a.m. My partner, 45-year-old male, and I, 33-year-old female, are chatting in the kitchen since he just got home from a 12-hour night shift in manufacturing. He was telling me about his plan to shower and get to bed quickly this morning. As we're talking, my 7-year-old daughter wakes up and heads to the bathroom with the shower. We also have a half bathroom in the basement, away from the bedrooms. I didn't say anything to her. My partner commented that it was inconsiderate for me to allow her to go in there. I pointed out that she would only be a moment. She ended up taking less than 5 minutes, likely close to 3 at most. After she finished, she went back to bed and he got into the shower. While he was showering, he reminded me that we've discussed this before and that he shouldn't have to bring it up again. He believes that she should not use the bathroom he needs to get ready for bed, or work, at any time during his routine. He told me I'm inconsiderate for allowing her to get away with this behavior. So, am I the asshole for thinking a quick trip to the bathroom is reasonable? Edit to add. This situation led to a larger argument. I told him it wasn't a big deal that she took a quick pee. He thinks it's inconsiderate that he wasn't asked if he needed the bathroom first. He always asks us if we need the bathroom beforehand, even though there's a half bathroom in the basement. To him, it's not just that she used the bathroom, it's that neither of us checked to see if he needed it first. I feel that consideration should only apply when someone's planning to use the shower, not just for a quick bathroom trip. He's most upset that he isn't shown the same level of consideration he feels he shows us. Am I the asshole for getting an apartment without my boyfriend? My boyfriend has had his own apartment for about 2 years, while I've been living with my parents. I slowly started bringing up the idea of us living together, but he would never acknowledge it. Over the past 6 months, I mentioned it a few times, suggesting we could split rent and even get a bigger apartment together. I stay at his place as much as 5 days a week, so I thought he'd be open to the idea. But each time he'd either say nothing or change the subject. Eventually, I decided to look for an apartment for myself. I asked him beforehand if he'd be upset if I found my own place, but he just shrugged it off. When I found an apartment I liked, I sent him the link and mentioned I was going to tour it. Once I decided to take the apartment and told him, he suddenly said, "Well, I want you to live with me." I should have asked sooner, and I'm sorry I'm only asking now, but we can make room. I want you to live with me. By this point I had to let the landlord know my decision that day. Hearing him say that out of the blue hurt and frustrated me, especially since I had tried so many times to talk about living together. In the end, I took the apartment and we're now living separately. Am I the asshole? More context. My boyfriend, 27, and I, 26-year-old female, have been dating for 3 years. During the times I tried talking to him about living together, I also told him that if he wasn't ready, he should just let me know. He never gave a clear answer either way, which was very confusing. Am I the asshole for making noise at night and upsetting my roommate? I work the evening shift and usually get home around midnight. I have a mechanical keyboard, and I enjoy gaming and chatting quietly with friends late at night. My roommate lives in a separate room across from mine and is a very light sleeper. She's told me that I make too much noise at night and that it disturbs her sleep. To try to accommodate her, I bought O-rings for my keyboard, a sound dampening accessory, and even put a blanket on the wall facing her room to help reduce the noise. Despite these efforts, she doesn't want me to use my keyboard at all during the night and has also asked that I avoid talking altogether. I told her that while it's reasonable to want some quiet at night, I can't be completely silent. We're both paying rent and I feel we both have a right to use our space. She insists that I'm still not being quiet enough. I finally told her that at this point I've done what I can, and if she's still bothered, it's not really my problem. She got very upset and now I'm not sure what she plans to do. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for making noise at night and upsetting my roommate? I work the evening shift and usually get home around midnight. I have a mechanical keyboard, and I enjoy gaming and chatting quietly with friends late at night. My roommate lives in a separate room across from mine and is a very light sleeper. She's told me that I make too much noise at night and that it disturbs her sleep. To try to accommodate her, I bought O-rings for my keyboard, a sound dampening accessory, and even put a blanket on the wall facing her room to help reduce the noise. Despite these efforts, she doesn't want me to use my keyboard at all during the night and has also asked that I avoid talking altogether. I told her that while it's reasonable to want some quiet at night, I can't be completely silent. We're both paying rent and I feel we both have a right to use our space. She insists that I'm still not being quiet enough. I finally told her that at this point I've done what I can, and if she's still bothered, it's not really my problem. She got very upset and now I'm not sure what she plans to do. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for staying late to help a coworker making my boyfriend wait? The place I work, I'm 22 female, has a trash compactor, and at the end of the night the closing cleaner loads it and starts it up. However, minors aren't allowed to operate the compactor alone. It's dangerous and the path to the compactor is incredibly sketchy. To get there, you go down this twisted, winding hallway that feels like something out of a horror movie. Right now, I don't have a car because mine was totaled in an accident, and I'm waiting on insurance money to buy a new one. My boyfriend, 23 male, has been kind enough to give me rides to and from work, despite having a sprained knee, which I really appreciate. On Sunday night, one of my coworkers, a 16-year-old boy, was the closing cleaner and needed someone to go with him to the compactor. The only other person available was a really creepy guy who often acts inappropriately around our high school-aged coworkers, and I didn't want to leave my coworker alone with him. I care about this kid. He's sweet, though kind of short and chubby, so he wouldn't be able to defend himself easily. So he asked if I could go down with him and I agreed. My phone was nearly dead and no one had a charger, so I texted my boyfriend that I'd be out around 11:30, then powered off my phone to save battery. After helping my coworker, I finally got to my boyfriend's car around 11:50. When I got in, he immediately asked why I'd taken so long. I explained the situation, but he responded, "Why couldn't someone else do it?" I told him the managers and other staff had closing jobs that took longer, so they couldn't help. He then said, "Don't make me wait like that again, the kid can deal with it." I was taken aback and replied, "That's messed up. I'm not going to make him go down there with a creepy guy just to save you 20 minutes. He responded, "I'm doing you a favor, I don't want to have to wait." I asked why he had to be that way and he said, "Because I'm not waiting around." We were already driving at this point and I told him, "So you want me to just leave my coworker hanging to save you 20 minutes? He shouted, "Yes, I'm doing you a favor." I apologized and just sat in silence. We barely spoke the rest of the night. Now, I'm starting to feel guilty and wonder if making him wait was an asshole move. EDA. Some of the creepy things this coworker has done include talking about how attractive some high school girls are to two of our coworkers, without knowing their ages, prying into people's sex lives and personal lives, and being overly touchy, though not inappropriately. Am I the asshole for not visiting my elderly dad on Thanksgiving? I'm a 27-year-old woman and my dad, who is 74, lives in a nursing home about an hour away. Due to poor health and zero savings or retirement, his only income is Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. Our relationship is strained. He raised my siblings and me because my mom struggled with addiction, but he did the bare minimum, and sometimes even less. He often struggled to keep a job, didn't always have a vehicle, and there were times our utilities were shut off. We did have a roof over our heads, but he never lets us forget it. To preface, we are not the type of family to do anything for each other no matter what. We were raised in a very conditional environment, always on the brink of poverty. My sister, 29, and I are now very protective of our finances and our own kids, and we keep these separate from our parents because of the toxic behaviors they exhibited and continue to display. Currently, my younger brother, 23, struggles with addiction, criminal activity, and poor choices, and my dad refuses to stop enabling him. My dad has repeatedly allowed my brother to use his bank account information to borrow money, but my brother always takes more than he's allowed. Since my dad lives on a fixed income, this is a major problem. For example, my dad has even skipped taking his blood thinners to loan my brother money, leading to major strokes. At one point, my dad was nearly evicted from his nursing home because my brother emptied his bank account. My dad never pressed charges, but both the nursing home and I reported my brother to Adult Protective Services for elder exploitation. So far, he hasn't faced any consequences. My dad and brother act like they're in a toxic, codependent relationship. They'll say they hate each other only for my dad to be helping my brother out the next day or vice versa. Recently, this happened again, and my dad asked me to pay his internet bill because my brother emptied his account. My sister and I both refused. We've loaned my dad money before and learned our lesson. I explained to him that if he pressed charges against my brother, I'd be happy to help, but until then I wouldn't continue enabling this cycle. He texted me saying he was very disappointed in me and that he didn't want us to visit for Thanksgiving. My sister and I had already planned to bring our kids to visit him for Thanksgiving. Frankly, I wasn't eager to go. My toddler hates car rides and I dread visiting my dad. But I was willing to go for the sake of the holiday and the "you never know" sentiment. Today he messaged me saying he knows I'm avoiding him but has no idea why, and thinks I'm the asshole for canceling my visit, even though he told me not to come, because he couldn't get what he wanted out of me. He continued to manipulate the situation, saying he was just mad when he said that and so on. For context, despite his health issues, he is mentally aware, sane, and has a normal memory. There's no chance he genuinely doesn't know why I'm avoiding him. He just doesn't want to admit he was wrong, let alone apologize. So, am I the asshole for not visiting him on Thanksgiving after being treated poorly for not loaning him money? Would I be the asshole for not spending the holidays with my mom and sister? Hello. I'm a 24-year-old woman, and I feel like I'm being treated as the bad guy for refusing to spend Thanksgiving with my mom, 43, and sister, 20. To give some context, I'm in a relationship with the father of my two younger children, and I know that my mom and sister don't like him. I never try to force them to be around him, and I often attend family events with just my 3 kids. For my oldest child's birthday this year, I took him and his brother down to my mom's, who lives 4 hours away, while our youngest stayed with their dad. During the visit, my mom and her boyfriend, 55, invited friends and their kids to celebrate with us at the lake. While I didn't mind initially, things took a turn when they started making comments like, "You should date my son," and "You need to get out of the situation you're in," referring to my relationship. Since I'd ridden down with my sister and didn't have my own vehicle, I felt trapped. This really upset me, and after returning home, I didn't speak to my mom for about a week. Recently, my mom has been asking if my sister and I will come down for Thanksgiving. She wants me to bring all 3 kids, but she's made it clear that my boyfriend isn't welcome. Personally, I believe that if he's not welcome, I shouldn't go either. He shouldn't have to miss out on family moments with his kids. I explained to my mom that I'm not comfortable driving 4 hours alone with 3 kids, one of whom is an infant with a feeding schedule and 2 toddlers with short attention spans, without their dad. The trip would be incredibly stressful and overwhelming. My mom's response was curt and dismissive, as if I'd betrayed her by even suggesting it. Then my sister texted me asking if the kids and I wanted to come down with her, her son, and her boyfriend, again making no effort to extend an invitation to my partner. I repeated my reasons, explaining that our youngest has been having issues with a sensitive stomach, and I don't want to risk her getting sick in her car seat while I'm driving. My sister's response was a simple, "Yeah. Okay," which usually means she's upset. I do love my family, but they expect me to drive 4 hours there and back for every holiday with 3 kids in tow without my partner. If I don't bring my own vehicle, I end up stranded, waiting for others to decide when it's time to leave. So, would I be the asshole if I chose not to go? Am I the asshole for keeping our daughter from my sister? I'm seeking advice on a difficult family situation involving my sister, 35, which is affecting my partner, our young child, and me. I'm 29, and my sister and I have always had a complicated relationship. Her behavior often aligns with narcissistic traits, creating constant chaos in her relationships, whether with family, friends, or romantic partners. My parents have tried to support her, despite their own imperfections. My mom can be outspoken and my dad can be distant, but they've always done their best. In return, my sister has been verbally harsh, often criticizing my dad's character and mocking my mom's use of antidepressants, which my mom takes due to the strain of their relationship. It's difficult to watch, especially as her behavior now impacts my own family. My sister has a 5-year-old daughter whom I adore. She had her daughter with a partner she never intended to marry, essentially using him to have a child without his knowledge. Now that I've found a loving partner and we have a daughter of our own, my sister's behavior has become a more serious issue. Recently, she hosted a birthday party for her daughter. We couldn't attend the whole event, so we stopped by briefly to celebrate and then joined a family dinner the following day. We arrived at the dinner around 4 p.m. but planned to leave by 6:30 to accommodate our baby's sleep schedule. As we prepared to leave, my sister made a dismissive comment questioning if we really had to go. She then made additional remarks to others nearby, making us feel uncomfortable for prioritizing our baby's needs. While I'm used to her behavior, my partner felt hurt and publicly criticized. Later, my partner sent my sister a respectful message, sharing her feelings and asking that such comments not be made in the future. My sister responded that her comment was only meant for family, me, and not directed at my partner, which felt dismissive. This response deeply upset my partner, who now feels the need to distance herself, and our daughter, from my sister for her own mental well-being. My sister then accused my partner of using our child as a weapon. Initially, I thought distancing might be too extreme, but I understand my partner's point of view. She feels that if someone can't respect her as a mother, they shouldn't have a close relationship with our child. She's open to resolving things if my sister can apologize and commit to being respectful, but my sister seems uninterested in understanding our perspective. This situation is causing tension throughout our family. My partner feels isolated, I feel torn, and my parents are struggling with their own views. My mom and uncle understand our position but worry we might be taking things too far. I'm reaching out to see if anyone has been through a similar family struggle. How did you handle it and what was the outcome? Am I the asshole for ignoring my friend after rooming with them for 3 months? So, basically, I've been ignoring and avoiding someone I was friends with for about a year because, during our last week as roommates, he made it his mission to be as annoying as possible. You might be wondering how I know he was doing it on purpose. Well, I know because he literally told me he was going to annoy me since it was our last week together. To give some background, he wasn't the greatest roommate before, but that last week was something else. He completely disregarded boundaries and acted terribly, even though he knew I wasn't in the best emotional state. My boyfriend had broken up with me the previous week and he knew that because, 1, I told him since my ex was our mutual friend, the reason I even know him in the first place, and 2, I didn't know how volatile my emotions were going to be since I was also on my period. I just didn't want to have to explain myself if I ended up breaking down. At first, his behavior started off small. He'd come over to my bed, it was employee housing so zero privacy, and tease me about random things which was pretty normal so I shrugged it off. But then he started poking me repeatedly, even though he knows I hate being touched without permission. I have PTSD, which he's aware of, and don't like being touched unexpectedly, so this was a big no-no. I told him to knock it off but he just laughed and did it even more. I threatened to hit him if he didn't stop, I didn't and never would, but he thought that was hilarious and kept going until he got bored. He repeated this behavior for the rest of the week and it only got worse. He also made fun of me for missing my ex and laughed at the fact that I'd been broken up with. This continued for the entire week. On top of that, he would say things like, "You remind me of my mom," after I asked him to do the dishes. I'd been doing them for a while because he refused to pull his weight. He was rude to me for not helping him pack his suitcase, calling me a bitch more often than usual and raising his voice. He also refused to help me clean the room, saying, "The last people didn't, so why should we?" I only raised my voice at him once, and it was during this week when I told him to stop mentioning the breakup. I'm not someone who gets angry easily and he knew that, which I think he took advantage of the entire time we were roommates. But honestly, that week was my breaking point. Now, here's the kicker. I'm going back to work, it's a seasonal position, and I've been assigned to room with him again because employee housing automatically put us together, and there are no other options available. So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for losing my patience with my boyfriend who hasn't worked in 3 years? I'm a 34-year-old woman and I've been with my boyfriend, also 34, for 2.5 years. When we first started dating, he promised he'd go back to work by fall 2023, as he hadn't worked in nearly 3 years. Over the past year, we've been living at his apartment. He's been paying the mortgage from his savings, while I've covered our groceries and dining out. Although he spent 6 to 12 hours a day playing video games, he was a great boyfriend and we rarely fought. I loved him and treated him well. When fall 2023 arrived, he told me he still wasn't ready to go back to work and would wait until spring 2024 to start applying. I was worried because a 2-year break from work is a long time, and his management might have moved on without him. It was also disappointing that he didn't follow through on his promise. By March 2024 he did apply for a job, but the position was later retracted. After that, he waited 8 months for another position to open up. During this time I began to worry about our future together. I asked him multiple times to look for another job or take some courses while he waited. I tried to express my concerns politely, explaining that I have anxieties about our future because I want to buy a house, start a family, and well, there's my biological clock to consider. Each time I shared my concerns, he either got upset, saying I didn't believe in him, or ignored me. The last few times I brought it up, he straight up told me to bite my tongue. Over time, I felt increasingly hurt as he seemed to dismiss my feelings and opinions. Now, it's the end of fall 2024, he still hasn't found a job, and he's decided not to apply elsewhere. Last week, we found out he didn't get hired for yet another position with his desired company, and we can't get pre-approved for a mortgage because he doesn't have any income. He was devastated, and I was frustrated that he hadn't listened to me sooner. To top it off, it was an incredibly rough week. We were moving, I had a bladder infection, learned I'd have to rehome my dog due to allergies, got my period, and was still going to work every day. I'm usually a calm person, but I lost it. I yelled and told him I was losing respect and attraction for him because he just plays video games all day. I gave him an ultimatum: get a job within a month or we're done. The next day, I came home from work and immediately apologized. I told him I was ashamed of how I'd acted and wished I could take it all back. He responded by breaking up with me, saying I hadn't been there to support him when he needed it most, and then he moved out. So, am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for blowing up after my partner completely redecorated my side of the room without telling me? As the title suggests, I struggle with sudden changes, especially in my personal space. My partner and I have been together for almost 6 years and she's very aware of this. She even jokes about it, saying, "Is this your tism acting up?" whenever I'm set on keeping something the same or resist changes. Today is Veterans Day, and normally we go out to celebrate since I'm a veteran. But this year I had to work, so we didn't make any plans. After work, I ended up running errands for her and picking up a different dinner for our daughter, who didn't like what we'd planned to have, even though it was one of my favorite meals. I was already feeling tired, irritated, and frustrated when I got home. When I walked into our room, I saw that my entire side of the bedroom had been rearranged. I had no idea where anything was. My nightstand was replaced with a smaller, much lower one, and I just lost it. I immediately felt overwhelmed. She got upset, saying she was just trying to do something nice by cleaning up the whole room. She even pointed out that she had done it all on her own. For context, I work full-time, while she stays home and generally doesn't do much during the day. She says it's because of her back pain, which I understand, but it's rare that she cooks or cleans. Meanwhile, I was having a mini panic attack because I couldn't find my stuff. My medications, cords, and other important items were either missing or put away. We ended up in a big argument, and since then we haven't spoken. To make things worse, she didn't even put the dinner in the oven, which was all she needed to do to prepare it. So I ended up having to do that as well. I know this might seem like a small issue in the bigger picture, but changing my personal space, moving and replacing all my things without my knowledge, knowing how much that stresses me out, feels dismissive. To me, it doesn't seem like she did this for me. It feels like she just wanted to rearrange the room to her liking. She moved her own nightstand to my side and got rid of the piece I was using, one she had put there suddenly one day before and I'd finally gotten used to. Am I the asshole for blowing up and being upset about this? Am I the asshole for feeling hurt that my mom doesn't want to spend Christmas with us? My mom lives in California while I'm in Iowa. I have 3 adult children, 2 sons who live in Iowa and a daughter who lives in California. Every year when we're able to travel, my husband and I, along with any of my sons who can join, fly to California. My husband has a large family, and we usually spend Christmas at their family gathering spot before joining my mom afterward. My dad passed over 10 years ago, and my mom has always been flexible about when we celebrate, since to her, Christmas is just a day we pick to exchange gifts. She's usually fine with us spending Christmas with my husband's family first. My mom also uses the time we're with my husband's family to visit my sister and her young children, who are under 18. We all agreed this setup works, and she's happy to see my sister and her grandkids while we're not in town for Christmas itself. This year we made plans to go to California again. We couldn't make it last year due to some work constraints on my end, so my mom hasn't seen either of my sons, my husband, or me since December 2022. I let my mom know we were planning to come, but I only have limited time off, so we'd be there for just 1 week. I shared the dates and told her I hoped she'd be able to spend some time with us. Her response was, "Well, that doesn't work well if I'm going to your sister's house. If I'm only staying for such a short time, why am I even making the trip?" This really hurt, as it felt like she was saying, "Why bother?" And it made me question, why are we even making the trip? The whole reason is to see her, which doesn't happen often. I understand why she might prefer spending Christmas with young children. Kids bring that magical holiday energy. But she sees my sister's family regularly throughout the year. They visit each other frequently. Meanwhile, she hasn't seen me, my sons, or my husband in almost 2 years. It's tough not to feel like we're being overlooked, especially given how rarely we're able to see her. In the spirit of full transparency, I'll admit that in previous visits we didn't do much together. I used to have limited mobility, but over the past 2 years, I've lost over 100 pounds and had both knees replaced. My mom knows this. I'm no longer the one saying, "Go out without me." I'm now ready and eager to make the most of my new knees and renewed energy, whether or not she joins me. So here I am, torn. I get that holidays with young kids can be more appealing than with adults who might not be as entertaining, but I can't shake the hurt. Am I the asshole for feeling this way? Or should I just let it go? I'm ready to be told to get over it, but I'm genuinely struggling with her reaction. Am I the asshole? Downstairs neighbors tried to break into my mother's apartment. My mom and I were taking her dog out, and there were 4 teenagers sitting on the steps we were walking down. My mom asked them, "You all need to move out of the way, completely out of the way," because they hadn't fully moved at first and we didn't want the dog trying to jump on them. It wasn't a big interaction. My mom said her piece and they didn't respond. We all went on our way. Later, back in the apartment, my 2-year-old son was running back and forth. We live on the top floor, so naturally the downstairs neighbors could hear us. It turned out to be the same girls who had been on the stairs. They started banging on their ceiling, probably trying to get us to be quiet. It was only 6 p.m. though, so it's not like we were making noise late at night. Living below us, they're bound to hear us walking around no matter how quiet we try to be. Soon after, one of the girls, who looked around 12 or 13, came upstairs and asked, "Can you guys be quiet?" My mom went to the door and told her, "Don't come knocking on my door again," and then closed it. Not long after, the girl's mother came up, yelling at my mom and saying, "You don't talk to children that way." She then tried to push her way into our apartment. My dad was behind the door and managed to shut and lock it, and we called the police. When the police arrived, they didn't even speak to my mom. Instead, they talked to the woman downstairs, who made it seem like we were harassing them. I'm still waiting to hear what happens, but it left me wondering, are we the assholes for being noisy upstairs neighbors, and was my mom wrong for telling the girl not to knock on our door? To clarify, this is my mom's apartment, not mine. I have an update. The woman who tried to break into my mom's apartment has been arrested for criminal trespassing and harassment. I later found out that this is the same woman who tried to fight my mom at a gas station because my mom wouldn't sell her cigarettes without ID. Looking back, I agree that my mom didn't need to be so rude to the kids. I think her reaction came from her dislike of their mother, which isn't really a good reason. Personally, I wouldn't have handled it that way. And I don't think that woman should have sent her kid to confront us about the noise. She could have come up herself as an adult. All I know is my mom might need to move. Would I be the asshole if I asked my wedding photographer to touch up my photos for free? I got married in April 2024, and we chose an all-inclusive package from our venue, which included a photographer. We planned out the shots we wanted, but on the wedding day she seemed annoyed and rushed. Many of the photos feel off. I'm either not looking at the camera, or I look like she snapped the photo just as I looked her way without any time to pose. My husband, on the other hand, looks great in almost every shot. In most photos I look tense with a bit of resting face. At the end of her time, she said goodbye to the venue host, who was right beside me, and she barely acknowledged me, like we were difficult clients. To clarify, we didn't make any specific demands, and she even had to ask if I wanted additional shots because my requests were so simple that I didn't use up her full allotted time. My family was actually shocked at how laid back I was. It was a simple wedding, mostly managed by the venue, so I didn't need many special requests. At the end of the night, I asked about the timeline for receiving the photos. She told me 5 to 6 weeks, and I thanked her. At 7 weeks, we hadn't heard anything, so I reached out. She apologized and said it was busy wedding season, estimating 12 to 13 weeks instead. I understood and didn't want to rush her, but I wanted to use some photos for reviews for her in the venue. She sent a couple for us to use, but I still didn't get the full album until 15 weeks after the wedding. When I finally received the album, I was shocked to find every single photo unedited. Some are so zoomed in that you can see the peach fuzz on my face. I nearly cried looking through them. Out of all the photos, there are only 3 I'd consider printing, and even those are distant shots or ones where my face isn't visible. It felt like she just threw them into an album and sent it over. I also noticed she'd completed other weddings taken after mine, and those photos were touched up. Additionally, she had my husband and his groomsmen doing fun, unique poses that highlighted their relationships, but she had my bridesmaids and me doing nothing but looking at each other. I'd like to ask her to touch up the photos as part of the package we already paid for, considering the wedding cost over $18,000 for just 75 guests. The package included touch-ups, so I feel this should have been part of what we received. However, because of her attitude, I'm hesitant to ask as I don't want to cause any drama. Would I be the asshole if I asked her to edit the photos as originally promised? Am I the asshole for snapping at my boyfriend after hearing my grandfather was in a house fire? Let me set the scene. My boyfriend and I had just gotten in the shower. I was hugging him in the middle of telling him I love him when I heard my phone ringing. I peeked around the shower curtain and saw it was my mom calling, so I jumped out, answered, and put it on speaker. My mom said, "Pappy is on his way to the emergency room. The trailer burned to the ground. He, my aunt's name, and the dog got out, but he's unconscious." My grandfather, Pappy, is 82 and has multiple serious health issues. He raised me until I was 13 because my parents struggled with their own issues. So hearing this, I went into shock. I hung up the phone, sat by the bathroom sink, and silently cried, trying to process everything and figure out what to do next. My boyfriend peeked out of the shower, trying to understand what was going on, and asked, "What happened?" I replied, "Pappy is on his way to the hospital. He's unconscious and the trailer burned down." He then asked, "Does he smoke?" I, already in a fight or flight state, snapped back, I don't know what's going on," with irritation in my voice. He was just trying to make sense of the situation, but I was overwhelmed and wasn't in a state to answer questions calmly. He went back into the shower and I told him, "Baby, I'm just going to head into the bedroom." When he asked why, I replied, "To figure out what's going on." He then asked, "Are you mad at me?" I said, "No." I felt bad for snapping at him, so I decided to get back into the shower, hoping to reassure him that I wasn't upset with him. But he seemed annoyed and grumpy, which upset me further, and we started arguing. Since I hung up the call, I'd only wanted a hug and some reassurance that everything would be okay. So, am I the asshole? I feel guilty for snapping when he was just trying to figure out what was going on, but I was overwhelmed trying to process everything. How should I have responded in a situation like this? Am I the asshole for photographing shared trash and reporting it to property management? I rent a unit in a large house that was converted into a duplex, with the ground floor and top floor as 2 separate units. In my city, the water, sewer, and garbage services must be registered under the property owner's name. Therefore, the owner pays these bills and reimbursement is split equally, with each unit responsible for 50% of each bill, charged through an online portal. Our city provides curbside recycling collection and curbside composting for yard debris and food waste. Compost and recycling are collected weekly, while garbage is collected every other week. If the garbage bin overflows or there are extra trash bags placed outside the bin, additional fees apply. The garbage bin is a standard single-family home type of bin. A few weeks ago, new tenants moved into the downstairs unit. Unfortunately, they have been placing recyclable and compostable items in the garbage bin, causing it to fill up more quickly than necessary and leaving insufficient space for actual garbage. Meanwhile, the recycling and compost bins always have plenty of room. To avoid paying extra fees, I've been photographing the overfilled garbage and emailing the images to property management. I don't think it's fair for me to be charged additional fees just because the new tenants haven't learned to separate their waste properly. However, my boyfriend thinks I'm overreacting by taking these photos. The downstairs tenants now give me dirty looks and have started doing petty things, like locking me out of the main entrance if they see me on the porch. Am I the asshole for photographing the trash and reporting the issue to property management to avoid these extra fees? Am I the asshole for not wanting to attend a child-free wedding? Hello everyone, this is my first post on Reddit, so please bear with me. A little background. My boyfriend, 32M, and I, 30F, have been together for 5 years, and we have a nearly 3-year-old child together. We're the only couple in our friend group with a child. This friend group originally consisted of my boyfriend's friends before I joined, and although they've always been welcoming, we aren't particularly close, so I don't consider them my friends in the same way. Here's the situation. In August, my boyfriend was invited to be a groomsman in a friend's wedding, which will take place in February. He accepted the invitation, and everyone in the friend group is in the bridal party except me. I'm fine with this since I'm not as close to them as they are with each other. We started planning flights and accommodations because it's an overseas wedding. In November, my boyfriend received our invitation via email. As I read through it, I noticed that it specified the wedding would be child-free. This caught me off guard. While I fully understand that it's the couple's wedding and they can set any rules they want, I thought it would have been considerate to inform my boyfriend, as a groomsman, of this detail before he committed to being in the bridal party. To me, it felt a bit inconsiderate not to mention it earlier. I expressed my feelings to my boyfriend, explaining that I didn't feel comfortable traveling overseas without our child. Additionally, since he'll be busy with the bridal party activities, I'd be left on my own in a foreign country where I don't know anyone, which makes me uneasy. My boyfriend, however, doesn't see my point of view and still wants to attend to support his friend. I'm struggling with this because he wants to go, but I don't feel comfortable going without our child. I also don't feel okay with him going alone, as I believe we should make this decision together as a family. He's expressed that he wants to attend but not without me, so we're at an impasse. Am I overreacting? I need advice, and also, am I the asshole for not wanting to go to this child-free wedding? Am I the asshole for thinking my husband's job should compensate him for mileage? My husband's usual work location is only 2.5 miles, a 7-minute drive, from our home. Recently, another office that's about 55 miles, 1 hour, away has been struggling and asked for volunteers from nearby offices to help out for a few days. My husband volunteered to help for a day last week and another day this week. I asked him if the company is going to reimburse the mileage he's putting on our personal car for these extra trips. The company is certainly capable of reimbursing mileage, they've done it before. From my perspective, it seems perfectly fair to ask for reimbursement, especially since he's commuting an extra 4 hours without compensation. Additionally, our car isn't in the best shape, so the added 100 miles per day is increasing wear and tear on the vehicle. When I brought up the topic of mileage, my husband said the company wouldn't be reimbursing him. He became defensive and argumentative when I explained that I thought it was unreasonable for him to do this without compensation. I expressed that I felt the company might be taking advantage of him, and suggested that if the other office truly needed help, the company should be providing incentives to encourage volunteers. I even pointed out that perhaps others hadn't volunteered because they saw it as a negative return for themselves. Unfortunately, the conversation turned into a low-key argument. So, am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for wanting my coffee maker turned off when not in use? I, 23M, have a coffee maker that's a bit old but still works well. The issue is that the auto-off feature stopped working a while ago. It used to turn off automatically after making a cup, but now it just stays on. After a few months of it not working, I disabled the feature entirely. I don't mind if others use my coffee maker. I just ask that they turn it off when they're done. However, my family seems to have an issue with this. I've explained multiple times that the auto-off feature doesn't work and even showed my parents how it stays on. But every time I get the same response: there's an auto-off feature, just turn it on. When I remind them it's broken, they either go in circles with me or get weirdly quiet and change the subject. It mostly happens with my parents, though others do it too. This isn't a new issue, it's been happening occasionally for years. I know it's just a coffee maker, but the repetitive conversations make me feel like I'm going crazy. My parents have seen it. Stay on, yet they still pretend I never said anything. Here's why I want it turned off. 1. Leaving electronics on constantly isn't great for them. My dad, who has worked with technology his entire life, should understand this. 2. Our house wiring has a quirk where small kitchen appliances can't be used at the same time without blowing a fuse. So a coffee maker that's constantly on and heating water is going to cause problems eventually. Why I might be the asshole. I realize this is a small issue. My coffee maker won't break just because it's left on for a while, so maybe I'm making too much of this and should just turn it off quietly. It's also hitting a personal nerve. I've often felt infantilized and dismissed by people in my life, which makes me sensitive to feeling unheard. My sisters are the only ones who really understand me, but I've experienced this from parents, other family members, ex-friends/partners, and even teachers. Not being listened to is triggering old wounds, and that might be making me react more strongly. Am I the asshole for wanting my coffee maker turned off when not in use? Am I the asshole for not obeying my mother, 47F, when she wants me, 19M, to dress a certain way due to the temperature? Hello. My mother and I have had numerous disagreements, and one recurring issue is her wanting me to dress according to the season. Today, for example, I walked to my university, about a 30-minute walk, wearing shorts and a coat. When I returned home, it was around 9 degrees Celsius outside. For some background, I often wear fewer layers than what most people consider appropriate for the current temperature and season because I tend to feel too warm easily. I also simply feel more comfortable in shorts than in pants. When my mother saw me come home in cargo shorts, she was surprised. Later, she got upset, saying she doesn't want me to look weird, and warned that dressing this way might impact my future employment. She asked, "Do you see anyone else dressing like this?" She insisted that, since it's autumn, I should dress appropriately for the season and the temperature, to avoid negative looks from others. She even suggested that she might need to take away my shorts to prevent me from wearing them. We ended up in a shouting match about it, with neither of us willing to back down. So, am I the asshole here for dressing the way I feel comfortable, or is my mother being unreasonable? Am I the asshole for telling my friend he has a problem? I wasn't sure how to phrase the title, but here's the situation. My friend has been going through a rough time since his breakup. He's developed some unhealthy habits around girls, drinking and partying twice a week. Lately, it seems like his whole personality revolves around how many girls he can hook up with and how cool he appears to them. I've brought up my concerns several times, especially about his drinking. There have been occasions where he's been so drunk that he seemed seriously unwell. I've tried encouraging him to work out with me as a healthier outlet, but he's usually busy partying. When I suggested he tone it down a bit, he told me it's his life and that I shouldn't worry so much about what he's doing. Some of his other friends have said I should let him live his life since it doesn't directly affect me, so why should I care? But I see him leaning more towards spending time with those friends who encourage his partying, which only seems to add to his issues. He frequently feels depressed about not finding the right girl or about his mood swings, which I believe are tied to his lifestyle. While he hasn't done anything illegal, his behavior has escalated over the past month, and he recently admitted, while drunk, that he wants to have fun with as many girls as possible. Am I the asshole for stepping in and expressing my concerns, or should I just let him live his life without interference? Would I be the asshole for preferring to keep my car until it dies instead of giving it to my mom? I, 21M, am a college student who works part-time and lives with my mom, 59F, to save money and cover gas for my car, a 2012 Buick Verano. Recently, I found out my car needs some costly repairs. My dad, 62M, who has helped me maintain it for the past 4 years, suggested I just drive it until the engine gives out. At that point, he'd help me find a new used car. My car currently has 167,000 miles on it, so it's nearing the end of its life. When I shared this plan with my mom, she asked if I could give her the car so she could fix it up and use it herself for her commute, as it's more fuel efficient than her 2008 Enclave, which gets about 20 mpg compared to my car's 23.5. But this would leave me without a car. A bit of background: my mom drove the Verano for around 7 years and passed it down to me after I got my license. She originally got the Enclave from her aunt, who gifted it to her before she passed away. My mom was upset at the idea of me running her car into the ground, but technically it was my dad's car from the beginning. Back in 2012, my parents swapped cars since the Verano was better for my mom's commute. My parents had an argument over the phone, and I overheard them because they tend to yell a lot. My mom argued that someone else could fix and use the car rather than me driving it into the ground. My dad's point was that if I gave her the car, I'd be left without transportation. To summarize, my mom suggested I drive my dad's old SUV, a 2002 Ford Expedition, which we mostly use to transport stuff or people. My dad refused because it's inefficient, 17 mpg, and has issues like broken gauges and wonky suspension. She then suggested my dad get me a new car as soon as possible, but due to financial limitations that's not feasible. She also mentioned that I could use my savings, but both my dad and I agree that I should keep that money for emergencies. Not once did my mom offer to trade cars with me, and she rarely lets me drive her Enclave unless I'm taking it to the shop for her. I feel like I'm stuck in an argument between my parents, but I agree with my dad. He told me the car is mine, and I'm under no obligation to give it to my mom. I feel a little selfish wanting to keep my car until it dies, especially since my dad and I had already agreed on this plan. I could use my savings to buy another car, but I'd prefer to save that money for emergencies when I'm on my own. Would I be the asshole for keeping my car until it dies even if it feels a bit selfish? Am I the asshole for scheduling chores? I work a job that usually starts at 8 or 9 a.m., while my roommate works from home. I also have fibromyalgia, which means I get extremely tired after work. I don't mind doing the dishes and I've taken responsibility for them, but I've set a boundary. I start dishes at 6 p.m. Any dishes created after that will be cleaned the following morning. One of my other housemates is in charge of cooking half the week. The issue is that she doesn't plan her cooking around when everyone is usually home, and then she gets upset if no one eats dinner when it's fresh. We've told her we're grateful for the meals and that someone else can take over if it's too much for her, but she insists on continuing. The real problem is that she often makes dinner late, which is fine, but then gets passive-aggressive, or even starts yelling if I haven't done the dishes right after she finishes cooking. If I had left dishes piling up for days, or if I hadn't clearly explained that I can't do dishes past 6 p.m., I'd understand her frustration. But I clean everything by the next morning, and I can't change my work schedule or my energy levels due to fibromyalgia. So, should I just take an afternoon rest, then get up to do the dishes right after she's done cooking? Or is she overreacting here? I feel like they're just dishes and I already have a lot going on. But maybe I need to get better at managing my time or something. Our other roommate has said she doesn't care either way and prefers not to get involved. Am I the asshole or is my housemate overreacting? Am I the asshole for refusing to cover my friend's rent after she's been paying for our roommate's share for 2 months? Here's the situation. I am a 22-year-old female and I've been living with my best friend, 23 female, and 2 other roommates for about a year. At first, everything was going smoothly, but things have recently become more complicated. About 2 months ago, one of our roommates, 24 male, lost his job. While he's been looking for work, he's been asking my best friend to cover his portion of the rent and utilities. She has a full-time job and can technically afford to help him for a while, but she's also been asking me and our other roommate to contribute a bit more to cover his part, since she can't afford the entire rent on her own. I understand that everyone goes through tough times, and I recognize that he's trying to find work. However, this is where it starts to feel unfair. He isn't putting in a serious effort to secure a stable job. He's taken a few casual gigs here and there, but it's not enough, and he seems to be relying more on my best friend's generosity than on actively fixing his situation. To me, it feels like she's enabling him rather than motivating him to get back on his feet. I've spoken with her about this, and she says it's not a big deal because he's her friend, and she wants to help him out. I told her that I'm uncomfortable with the idea of her paying someone's rent when he isn't making enough of an effort to improve his circumstances. I also explained that I'm already struggling financially myself and can't keep covering additional expenses. Last night, I finally told her that I'm done contributing to this arrangement. If he doesn't start paying his share of the rent soon, I believe he should consider moving out. I don't think it's fair for me to pick up the slack simply because he's her friend, especially when he's not showing signs of working toward a solution. I told her that I can't continue helping cover for someone who isn't pulling their weight. She was really upset and said I was being cold-hearted and selfish. She accused me of not caring about him and argued that true friends support each other through difficult times. Now, some of our mutual friends are backing her up, saying that I'm being too harsh and that I'm not acting like a good friend. I'm feeling torn because I do want to support my best friend, but I don't think it's my responsibility to keep this going. Am I being unreasonable? Am I the asshole for not wanting to contribute to this situation anymore and suggesting he move out if he doesn't start paying his share? My son keeps telling me about the man with no eyes in his room. Started just after we moved in. Nothing dramatic at first, just my 4-year-old Liam talking about the man with no eyes. Mommy, he was in my room again, he said over breakfast, pushing his Cheerios around. I did what any mom would do, told him it was just a dream. But Liam wouldn't let it go. No, he's real. He stands in the corner and watches me. Even without eyes, he sees everything. Every morning brought another story about the man. I kept telling myself it was just the stress of moving, that kids get weird about new houses. The price had been surprisingly low, but in this market I hadn't questioned our luck. But then one morning, Liam said something that made my skin crawl. He told me his name, Liam whispered, clutching his dinosaur. He says he's called Michael. He says he's lonely here. He wants someone to watch with him. Michael. The name stopped me cold. The previous owner had been Michael, just another name buried in the paperwork I'd barely glanced at. The realtor had mentioned he'd moved out suddenly, leaving most of his furniture behind. But hearing that name from Liam's mouth felt wrong. Things got worse. Liam stopped sleeping through the night. He'd wake up crying, saying Michael was getting closer. First the corner, then the foot of his bed, then right next to his pillow. He started talking about the watching game, how Michael wanted him to watch things with him all the time, never blinking, never stopping. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I waited outside his door after bedtime, listening. At 3 a.m. I heard him. Please, please don't come closer. I don't want to play the watching game anymore. His voice was so small. I burst in and hit the lights. Liam was huddled against his headboard, tears running down his face, staring at the corner by his toy chest. He's still there, he whimpered, grabbing my nightgown. He doesn't like the light, but he's still there. I can see where his eyes should be. He says if I keep watching with him, I'll see everything too. I called the realtor the next morning. To hell with the mortgage, we needed out. She seemed unsurprised, almost like she'd been expecting my call. We packed in a rush, throwing everything into boxes. As we drove away, I felt like I could breathe again. Then Liam looked out the window. Mommy? Michael says he's sad you're leaving. He says he liked it better when he wasn't alone. He needs someone to watch with. Days later I couldn't help myself. I waited until Liam was playing with his blocks and looked up our old house. The first result made my heart stop. A news article from just 6 months ago about Michael Andrews, the previous owner. Police had found him in the crawl space after neighbors complained about a smell. They'd ruled it a suicide, but the details were strange. He'd been a night security guard at an art gallery, and his final log entry mentioned learning to see everything and watching without eyes. They found him surrounded by photographs of people sleeping, watching, always watching. His body was mutilated, especially his eyes. In his final note, he wrote about achieving true sight and needing to share it with others. I slammed the laptop shut, but the damage was done. I must have made some sound because Liam looked up at me then. His smile was different. Wrong. Michael says we're his new family now, Liam whispered, still smiling that awful smile. He followed us here because he needs us to learn to watch like he does. He says once you start watching, you can never stop. That night, I caught Liam staring at me while I slept. His eyes were wide, unblinking. Watching. Always watching. My family is refusing to leave the basement. How do I get them to come out? They've been down there too long. I keep telling them they just need them to come upstairs, to leave that cramped, dark room of packed dirt and come into the light. We all need to leave this place while we still can. I'm still clinging to the hope that it's not already too late. Did you know that in Connecticut, sellers aren't required to disclose that a death occurred in a home unless you submit an inquiry in writing? I sure as hell wasn't aware, not until after we'd already moved in, until it was already too late. I wonder if whoever buys this place after we're gone will think to ask. I did later learn that the realtor regretted selling to us. That if he had known our situation, he never would have shown us the place. I can't help but imagine what our lives would have been like if we'd never bought the small fixer-upper off of Lakeshore Drive. That's all moot now, of course. If it weren't for the price, we'd never have looked at it in the first place, especially since it had been a foreclosure. I hated the feeling of building our lives on the shattered remains of someone else's, but Gideon and I needed to move, we had to. We couldn't stay in our old house, its recently vacated bedroom dangerously close to becoming a shrine. We couldn't keep going to the same grocery store in our tiny town, where everyone knew and regarded us with looks of pity. Once we moved to Bridgeport, we were just 2 more people amongst 100,000. We could mourn in peace and anonymity, lost in the throngs. But living in the city doesn't come cheap. So, that's why Gideon and I were looking at a fixer-upper that had sat vacant before the bank eventually reclaimed it. I should have trusted my gut when I thought. Something about the place was off. The new cheery welcome mat seemed at odds with the rest of the house, which gave off an aura of a deep, almost crushing, sadness. It hit me like a wave when we first walked in, a split second before the scent of rot and decay followed in its wake. The realtor apologized and said that they'd found fridges full of rotten food from when the prior owners left the place abandoned. He assured us that he'd dealt with something similar before, and with a few windows left open it'd air out in no time. The house was outdated in parts, yet remodeled beautifully in others. It seemed the prior owners had apparently begun the process of painstakingly restoring it before they abandoned the place, leaving behind a new kitchen, but upstairs bedrooms that were missing flooring and plastered with faded, mildewy wallpaper. As we approached the door to the basement, the smell intensified to eye-watering levels. There was something else that gave me pause too, something about the basement. The space was cramped, all unfinished dirt floor and exposed brick beyond the small area that had been set up for a washer and dryer. Right at the edge of where the faint light from the single pull-string lamp faded, was a small wooden ladder leading down into a darkness that soon swallowed it up. Despite the realtor's best attempts at leading us away from it, I found myself subconsciously drawn to it, unaware I'd even approached until I was standing at the edge. What's down there? I felt that wave of sorrow and longing the closer I got to the packed dirt floor leading down to the blackness. Nobody. For a brief moment, his salesman's smile slipped off of his face, and after an awkward silence he quickly added, just a crawl space. The smile was back. Just a little extra storage space. As my husband and I stared at the dark expanse beyond the ladder, we discussed plans to install some lighting to make that space, that took up the majority of the basement, usable. We planned a lot of things back then. We wanted to place Bree's belongings in one of the bedrooms like we had at our old home, even though part of us knew that their presence only served to highlight her absence. But the rooms upstairs were a mess, riddled with holes through the subfloors, mold behind the walls, so we reluctantly agreed we needed to complete the renovations before the space would be usable. It didn't feel right to put Bree's things in a storage unit during that time though. Yes, I knew they were exactly that, just things, just objects, but no matter how many times I told myself that, it felt like we'd be leaving her in a storage locker. So, we wrapped up the rocking chair I'd read to her in cellophane, lovingly packed the stuffed animals and Barbies, and with the rest of the house being in the state that it was, we tucked them neatly into the only place safe from construction, the crawl space. Close by and protected while we made a safe, more permanent place for them. At first, I expected us to spend all of our free time down there like we used to in her room at our old house, but something about that place alarmed me as much as it called to me. I think that even before we'd finished placing her belongings down there, we realized that we'd made a mistake. Some part of me knew, maybe it was the look of that place, the black dirt that seemed to swallow up any light we directed at it from headlamps and flashlight beams, or the overpowering smell of lingering rot mixed with old earth. Maybe it was that feeling, the one of emptiness I'd felt when we first moved in had been replaced by something far worse. As we placed the final box, the stale air down there was thick with a sinister sort of excitement. Even then, I had a vague feeling of no longer being alone. It didn't take long for the noises to start. I was running a load of laundry when I heard it over the rumble of the machine, a prolonged shriek, the sound of something sharp being slowly dragged across cellophane. It was my first time alone in the basement, and to hear that emerging from the claustrophobic space. At first I thought it was Gideon down there, opening the rocking chair, and I smiled sadly at the thought of him leaving work early, succumbing to the need to feel close to her again. Too had felt the burning desire to go down there despite myself. Couldn't resist? I called down to the space. The sound abruptly stopped and I heard shuffling along the hard dirt. I put a foot on the old wooden ladder, figured I'd join him so he wouldn't be alone. It felt right, going down into the darkness. No one should have to be alone, especially in a place like that. That's when I heard footsteps from upstairs, followed by Gideon's voice, announcing his arrival home from work. I sprinted up the basement steps, out of breath and nearly tripping, as the only thing running through my mind was that if Gideon was upstairs, who the hell was in the crawl space? As I was about to describe what I'd heard to Gideon, I suddenly felt silly. I was in a new place with our past wounds still so fresh. Of course I was imagining things. The next morning I was working from home when I heard it echo through the previously silent house. A giggle, a familiar sounding one, coming from outside the kitchen window. I didn't remember leaving the window open, but when I went in to check, it was closed. Still, the laughter continued. That's when I realized, it wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from below, floating up through the grate under the stove. It went on like that. Every so often, the sound of her soft laughter would float up from the basement. But there was a wrongness to it. It was laughter in name only, hollow and joyless, lacking the light my daughter had always carried. Gideon never mentioned hearing it, so I never brought it up. At the time I thought maybe I was just losing it due to stress. The stress of losing Bree, of starting over in a new city. Looking back now and recalling the circles under my husband's eyes, the grimness there, he must have been in the same boat. The first time she spoke to me, I'd been bringing down a box of Christmas decorations. Mom? I nearly choked on the air I'd been breathing. I never thought I'd hear Bree's voice again. For a moment I thought I'd dreamt it. Are you coming? The voice, song-like, floated up from the dark. From the crawlspace. A dry little cough echoed. I lost my shit. I ran upstairs and I finally told Gideon. My husband gave me a look when I did, a look that said he understood, and if what I needed from him in that moment was to go into the basement and duck into that dark little crawlspace so he could tell me everything was okay, then he was going to do it. The little room was pitch black as I followed him into it. All of our attempts to install lighting down there, temporary and otherwise, had failed, and the dim glow from the single bulb in the basement was swallowed up before even descending the ladder. We clicked on our flashlights. I wondered if he too had heard the sound of something moving across the packed dirt that echoed out seconds before we directed our beam towards the darkness. The sound of scurrying? Gideon gasped, and a moment later turned to reveal what he'd seen. A blanket has been placed across the hard dirt, one of Bree's, adorned with smiling characters from her favorite animated movie. Stuffed toys were strewn along it, a single book lay open off to the side. Didn't even need to see the impression left on the blanket to know that someone had been sleeping down there. Gideon shot me a questioning look. I didn't open the boxes, I whispered. He stared into the empty space for a long time before he nodded absent-mindedly. Insisted we leave the house, call the police to seek out whoever had been living in our home. It was a long night. We gave statements to one officer as the others searched the home. I don't know what was worse. When the first officer said there was no evidence anyone else had entered the house, or when the second officer stayed back to speak to me in hushed tones. You've lost someone. I nodded in surprise, even though it was a statement and not a question. He leaned in. Whatever you think you hear down there, it isn't real. Nothing good could come from a place like that. You've been in the crawlspace? I got called to do the wellness check on the Mikowskis and... He stared off into space for a long moment before he quickly shook his head, as if trying to escape from his own thoughts. Well, I found them. They were down there. The Mikowskis. It took me a moment to place the name as that of the prior owners. I'd seen the name on some mail we still received for them and brought back to the post office. What were they doing down there? I asked, even though the look on his face had me questioning if I truly wanted to know the answer. They weren't in a position to tell me. He stared past me towards the house. There wasn't enough left of them. That night I couldn't sleep. I dreamt of the prior owners who never left this place. I dreamt of Bree. I dreamt of the crawlspace. I awoke to the feeling of eyes on me. Gideon was sitting up in bed, giving me a concern-laden stare. We need to talk about last night. I don't think you should go into the basement by yourself. My response was silence, confusion. You don't remember what you said to me? He whispered as if he thought someone else could be listening. I shook my head. That you wanted to go down there to be with her. That, he choked back. A sob. You didn't want her to be alone in the dark. My horrified expression seemed to mirror his own. You know she's not down there, Nettie? She never was. I knew that, rationally I did. Then who, what, is down there? I've never seen my husband look more afraid than when he softly said, I don't know. The longer I stayed away from the basement, the louder her laughter got, the more persistent the pleading whispers. When the hushed pleas turned to crying, God, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go see her. Are you coming? The weak voice interjected between racked sobs. I found myself drawn to the sound, parental instincts still there, a mental phantom limb. I knew I made the right decision as I descended. Well, until I looked at her. Eyes glinted up at me from the well of blackness beyond, and the sobbing ceased instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. No, baby. My mouth was dry as the rational part of me desperately screamed at the rest of me, reminding me I was not talking to my daughter. I can't. I fumbled for my phone for the light, half expecting to see her staring up at me, big brown eyes wide, half afraid of what I'd see. As light flooded the room, I heard a soft movement, something wet sliding across the packed dirt of the ceiling. But I saw nothing. The little storage room was empty. As soon as the light went off, though, those eyes were back, regarding me from higher up along the wall, moving steadily downwards. Never once blinking or darting away from my own. Please? Her voice repeated. My stomach dropped as I felt a chill at my proximity to the thing mimicking my daughter's voice. Something I'd apparently just caught in the act of crawling down the wall. I don't like the dark, she croaked out. That's what broke me. That's what led to my husband finding me broken down, bawling at the kitchen table. I begged him not to go back down. But he insisted. This was our home, he'd said. If we couldn't feel safe here, then where could we? So, we went down into the basement, me with my phone light, and him with the emergency flashlight. It was bold of me to assume that the situation couldn't possibly get worse. By the time I'd descended the little ladder, he'd already walked into the room. He had his back to me, standing in the shadows. "Gideon, where's your flashlight?" I turned it off. "She doesn't look like I remember," he whispered. "Annette," he added slowly, never turning to look at me, his broad frame blocking whatever he was seeing from my flashlight beam. "Can you please go upstairs, pack a bag for us?" "But now? Please?" he begged, his voice calm in tone but shaky in delivery. He told me to leave without him if he didn't come back up within 10 minutes. To leave the house if he didn't come out of that basement, and to never come back, call movers to get our things. I nodded, numb. So I waited. 10 minutes. 20, 30. After an hour had passed, I went down to the basement, and the ladder was gone. He must have pulled it down to keep me from coming after him. I felt a wave of unease, but infinitely worse, a sick pang of jealousy. Jealousy that he was down there and I wasn't. I whispered Gideon's name into the dark. "Why haven't you left yet?" His voice was weak, heavy with desperation. "Babe, it's time to go," I replied as firmly as I could. "We need to leave. All of us." Gideon's voice was choked, muffled. "No, Nettie. It's too late for me. A day has passed since then. I'm still here. I can't force myself to leave. How do I get them to come out? I just want us to be a family again." This morning when I went down to check on them, the only response that emerged from the crawlspace sounded like a low, wet gurgle. They've been silent ever since. I called the police, but they didn't seem to think that my husband and daughter refusing to leave the basement constituted an emergency. I know Gideon told me to leave, but I can't just leave my family, him and Bree, down there in the dark. I'm out of ideas. We need to be together, the three of us. Please help me. If I can't figure something out soon, if I still can't get them to come to me, well, there's only one option left. I used to cook for a Hollywood celebrity who made me face away from him whilst he ate. "You must remain in the room whilst I dine," he told me 3 years ago. "But face the wall, and do not turn around until I've eaten every last crumb." I nodded. I will tell you when I've finished," he brashly interrupted, having anticipated my question. And when I made the mistake of breaking his one rule, I saw something terrifying. "I hate to disappoint you, but I won't endanger myself by naming this world-famous figure. I've been lying low since February, praying to never cross his path again. I moved from Los Angeles to Toronto. Put more than 2,000 miles of deserts, mountains, and woodland between that man and me. Yet I still feel watching eyes upon me. Every single day. I fear that he hopes to silence me before I spill his secret. That's why I won't tell you to run from Ella. Nowhere is safe from him. Instead, I'm hoping that putting this story out there will give him no reason to silence me. You're all about to learn the truth, so he'll have to tread carefully in the future. Right? I know I've not named him, but I've put a spotlight on the horrors of the hills. This is a Hollywood icon, and I cooked his lunches and dinners every day from November of 2021 to February of 2024. But one particular lunchtime, an act of recklessness brought my employment to end. A flatbread topped with charred spring onions, chili flakes, and feta. That was the dish. A modest lunch for a self-proclaimed modest man. Perfectly ordinary food. I didn't serve the heart of a stillborn babe. Not the ribs of some famous rival. Just a light, nutritious dish to bridge breakfast and dinner. That day was the same as any other, so I don't know why I did it. I'd spent 3 years cooking for my client, and I'd never previously questioned his only rule. I hadn't dreamt of disobeying him, as he paid such a disgustingly inflated salary. Not until one ordinary day in late February. I placed the flatbread on the table, walked over to the kitchen counter, then focused my gaze on the wall ahead. Twiddled my thumbs and waited patiently whilst he tucked noisily into his meal. That was something. I'd always noticed. The sound. The slaps and smacks of his lips, tongue, and teeth meeting various food textures. I don't have misophonia, but that man managed to produce noises which utterly perturbed me. I don't care about those who talk whilst they eat. Don't even care about those who eat with their mouths open. No, the racket of this man's feasting disturbed me because it always sounded like more than one person eating. There were even the distant sounds of what I'd convinced myself were tiny voices, as if the man had spent 4 years sneaking friends into the kitchen behind my back. As if they were speaking amongst themselves in hushed tones. Muttering odd phrases. Not food reviews but comments on culture. Comments on countries and histories. This tells us, in the mountains of Malaysia, 400 years ago, the snippets of insights were always too quiet to fully distinguish. Of course, It was the wet sloshing and smacking that stole most of my attention. I tried to make meals that were softer, in the hope that this would lead to quieter munching. I served yogurt, risotto, and so on. No matter what I attempted, the sounds never lessened. And I knew that this was no mean-spirited joke. He wasn't sharing a meal with hidden guests. Though I certainly wouldn't have been the first woman to find myself at the receiving end of his bizarre antics. Believe me, over the years I'd considered numerous scenarios in my head, but none of them felt right. None of them warmed my chilled flesh whilst that awful man ate, so I eventually broke. Something came over me. Madness, I suppose, born of years working in a draining environment. All for a healthy heap of bucks. Well, I'd passed my threshold. The money no longer mattered. I had to know. I turned away from the wall. The man at the kitchen table was not eating. Not in any human sense of the word. The sides of his face had opened like the skin of a tangerine, revealing neither hidden tissue nor bone beneath. There was a crater within his skull. A crater into which he was shoveling torn strips of my lovingly cooked flatbread. The meal was not disappearing into a mouth. There was no mouth below the celebrity's unzipped face. Chunks of bread and toppings were washing over a dozen rolling eyeballs, each with a black sclera, a white iris, and a red pupil. Inhuman eyes. Eyes that were not consuming the food, but letting the broken fragments slide off their rolling surfaces, as if absorbing the meal's secrets. Learning something from it. And the flatbread did not disappear into the body below. It disintegrated in the black, watery film coating those many eyes. I was too haunted to scream, but I'd already been detected. The celebrity stopped. His hand hovered, and those many eyes, coated in the dissolving crumbs of my meal, swiveled to face me. Then the man started to tremble violently, crushing the remaining handful of flatbread in the pit of his palm. I allowed my mouth to release a meek whimper as flecks of bread clattered against the china plate below. My eyes had already flitted towards the kitchen entrance and the lobby beyond it. The front door was in sight and my weak legs carried me towards it. But the man did not need to stand to pursue me. He punched his arm forwards and a long reptilian tentacle tore through his open palm, escaped from its prison of human skin, then shot across the kitchen towards me. I was already crossing the lobby as the lunging limb hissed at me from its black scales. I felt the alien arm's stale breath against my back, cutting through my t-shirt as that man sought my flesh. Not to eat, but to wash over his many eyeballs. He wanted to soak me up, study me. And as I thought of all of the womanizing he'd done over the years, the many flings who'd come and gone, I wondered whether any of them had met that fate. I fumbled with the latch for an eternal second, flung the door open, and triumphantly made it to the porch. But the fine prick of a sharp limb caught my spine as I stumbled onto the driveway, instantly stained my shirt with a staggeringly large pool of blood. Yelping in agony, I pushed onwards. Pushed across the driveway, scaled the fence, and ran through the streets of Beverly Hills. I remember little of what followed. Barely remember how I ended up in Toronto, in all honesty. I know that I abandoned everything. My home, my friends, my family, and my life. In spite of that, this nightmare isn't over. For months I have felt something watching me. I'm convinced. Just as I'm convinced that this celebrity eats more than people food. I will handle my own breakfasts, the star firmly told me back in 2021. I replied, "Are you sure?" I make a mean, "You would not want to cater to my morning needs," he half growled. At the end of the day, this is about more than getting the truth out there. More than, hopefully, protecting myself from him. This is a cautionary tale. No matter how good the pay, do not become any celebrity's personal chef in LA. I work in an IT department and found this email in the drafts folder of a missing employee. Hey love, I know it's late. Actually, I'm not sure when you'll get this email. I'm sorry I haven't called you back yet. I've been busy. I wish I had listened when you told me to come home earlier. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. I need to explain what happened. I want to write down every detail I can remember. I need to tell you the truth because I think I'm trapped here. I'm not sure if I will get to see you again. As I'm sure you gathered, I stayed late at the office again, and yes, I know I'm an idiot. You were right. When you called earlier, I could hear it in your voice, how worried you were, but I brushed it off. I laughed at your bad feeling because it sounded like superstition, and I didn't want to hear it. I had work to finish. My deadlines, my clients. I wasn't going to let a feeling pull me away. Stupid. So stupid. I stayed until about midnight. When I finally decided to leave, I grabbed my phone only to realize it was dead. Completely. It had been plugged in all day, but apparently the outlet just wasn't working. Of course. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured I'd just charge it in the car on the way home. I wasn't in a hurry. Big mistake. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, thinking it would be a nice change to get a bit of exercise. 6 flights down. The building was quiet, almost eerily so. There was this oppressive silence as I passed each floor, no distant chatter, no sound of typing. Just the dull hum of the building, the kind that starts to make your ears ring if you listen too long. And the air was heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I felt a little off, but I chalked it up to being tired. When I reached the lobby, it was empty. No sign of DeMarcus, the security guy. You know how he usually makes his rounds? Well, I figured he was doing that. Still, it felt strange not to see him at his desk. The place felt too big, too vacant. The kind of emptiness that makes you feel exposed, like something's watching from the shadows. I didn't stay long. I headed to the parking garage. You know how dim that place is, right? Tonight it felt even worse. Most of the lights were out, and the ones still working flickered like they were dying. My car was parked alone, under the one working light, a flickering, buzzing light. I should have known something was off when I felt that heaviness again. Like the garage was breathing, watching. I thought I was just being paranoid. I got in the car, but when I turned the key it wouldn't start. Nothing. Not even a click. My phone was still dead, and all I could hear was the faint echo of something. Scraping? Or maybe shuffling, coming from deep in the garage. I tried not to think about it. I thought it was a cat or something, but it didn't sound right. I'm getting goosebumps just writing this. I went back inside to ask DeMarcus for help. 20 minutes passed and he never came back. It was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. The only sound was the hum of those awful fluorescent lights, buzzing overhead like they were the only things keeping the dark at bay. Something didn't feel right. DeMarcus never leaves the lobby unattended that long. That's when I saw the flyer for a taxi service pinned to the wall behind his desk. I figured it was my best bet. I used the landline to call them and waited outside for the cab. It was cold, but more than that, it was quiet. Too quiet. You know how there's always some noise, even late at night? A distant car, maybe someone walking by? But there was nothing. Just me standing there, feeling watched. Then I heard it. Again, the scraping noise. Louder this time. It felt closer, and it was coming from the direction of the garage. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. Watching. Waiting. The cab took forever. Way longer than it should have. I was about to go back inside when headlights blinded me. I almost cried with relief. I jumped in, eager to just get home and put this night behind me. The driver was incredibly normal. We talked a bit, made small talk. Felt calming. Safe. We hit a red light, and I don't know why, but I felt the need to confess. I told him about the real reason I stayed out late tonight. About our fight last night. How I didn't want to come home because I was still mad, because we'd said things we didn't mean. I wanted to be petty tonight. I wanted my absence to hurt you. The driver just listened. He gave me some advice, said relationships are hard work, said I should make amends. For a moment, it felt like everything was going to be okay. I felt lighter, like I was on my way back to you and everything would be fine. But then the light turned green and he didn't move. I pointed it out. Hey, the light's green. He didn't respond. I nudged him, thinking maybe he didn't hear me. Still nothing. Hey buddy, the light. I said louder. I reached out to shake him, but when I touched his arm, it felt wrong, stiff. But he was still breathing. I could see it, shallow and slow, his chest barely rising and falling. But he didn't react to me at all. He was just frozen. Staring straight ahead, hands on the wheel, blinking occasionally. Panic set in. I jumped out of the car, looked around for help, but the streets were empty. Everything was closed. No one around. No traffic, no pedestrians. Just me, this unmoving cab, and the quiet. Too quiet. It was like the world had emptied out, like I was the only one left. I went back to the car, but the driver, he was gone. Just gone. The seat was empty. I tried telling myself that maybe he had gotten out, maybe he had gone for help, but deep down I didn't believe it. I was too scared to believe it. I got in the driver's seat, thinking I could make my way home myself. I started driving, hoping to find my way back, but I wasn't familiar with the way the cab driver had been taking me. I just kept trying to head east, but the streets kept forcing me to make unexpected turns. I drove for at least 30 minutes and then I found myself on the street of my office building. Something inside me screamed that this wasn't possible. I should have been miles away from it, even if I hadn't been close to home either. But I still clung to hope that the bad feeling was all in my head. I thought of this as an opportunity. Now I could head home the way I was familiar with. I pushed the accelerator to the floor and tried to race by the office, but something went wrong. The taxi made some horrible metal rending noises and slowed. It stalled completely right there in front of the building. The same spot where I started. I got out. The street was empty, but the feeling that something was watching me was overwhelming now. Like it was right behind me, breathing down my neck. Ran back inside. The lobby was still empty, but the lights, they were flickering, flashing. And, I swear to you, in the dark moments I could see DeMarcus. Or, something that looked like him. Sitting in the chair, twisted, like his body had been broken in ways that weren't possible. But when the lights flickered back on, the chair was empty. I didn't look back. I ran for the elevator. I pushed the button and waited. I could see the elevator light was on the 10th floor due to the light-up display above the elevator doors. I stood there awkwardly. Then I heard the scraping sounds again, still coming from outside the building. I stared at the lit-up 10 and tried to will the number to change. To my delight, it did, quickly changing to 9 and then 8. But there it remained. I heard the lobby doors open. Instinctively, I turned back, certain that the sound was the result of DeMarcus returning from a patrol. But then I heard the scraping. It was much louder. It was inside the lobby. That horrible noise echoed across the large room. I turned and sought out the light-up display, hoping to see progress. There was some. It now read 6. But I could heard something new behind me, skittering, clicking on the floor. The scraping sound grew closer too. So, I abandoned the elevator and rushed into the stairwell. I took the stairs 2 at a time, but no matter how far I went, I never passed any doors. I could hear the first floor doors open and something skitter in. The scraping sound accompanied it. I thought the scraping was something being dragged, and my imagination thought of a giant centipede with a bloated body that scraped along. Either way, I tried to focus on the stairs in front of me. The last thing I wanted to do was trip and fall. Something told me that I wouldn't be able to get up again. Yet the stairs seemed endless, spiraling up and up, the thing behind me getting closer with every step. Finally, I reached the 6th floor. I bolted to my office, entered the side entrance and slammed the door behind me. I checked 4 times that it was locked. And, now I'm waiting here. I've tried everything. The outlets don't work. My phone won't charge. The computers are on but have no internet. At least that thing in the stairwell never seemed to emerge. At least I don't think it did. Shortly after I started to settle in here for the night, I heard our front lobby doorbell ring. The echo of the bell reverberated through the hollow office hallways, sharp and unexpected. I ran to the door, hoping that it was someone coming into the office early. Something told me that if I just found one other person, I'd wake from this nightmare. Everything would return to normal. But I hesitated when I reached the lobby. We had thick curtains hanging by the entrance. To see who was ringing the bell, I'd have to get close to the door and pull back the curtain. The bell rang again and again, like the person on the other side was getting impatient. The risk was worth the reward though. I needed to see a familiar face. I tugged the curtain aside. There, just inches away, was a face. Pale, expressionless, pressed close against the glass. Too close. The man's dead, glassy eyes locked with me, staring through me, unblinking. The stranger's mouth was stretched in a faint, unnatural smile, too wide and too still. He stood unervingly still, as though he had been waiting there for me all along. He otherwise looked like he could have worked here. He looked like a stereotypical businessman, complete with a brown suitcase in one hand. But then the bell rang again. It wasn't coming from the door. It came whenever the stranger, still unblinking, opened his mouth. In a panic, I returned the curtain and retreated to my cubicle in the back of the office. When I could calm down, my only plan was to try and sleep, and hope the world would turn back to normal in the morning. But the lights, they won't turn off. No matter what I do, they stay on, buzzing and flickering just like the parking garage lights. And I can still hear that thing. It's outside the door, scratching, waiting. I tried to sleep under my desk, but every time I closed my eyes, I could feel it. Something watching. Getting closer. Keeping my eyes closed was impossible. And yet, I kept feeling like the next time I opened them, that stranger's face would be there. Right next to mine. But that's not what happened. Instead, the last time I opened my eyes, I got a different surprise. There was a phone, a landline, sitting on the floor in front of me. It definitely wasn't here before. And now, it's ringing. It's been ringing for a while. I unplugged it, but it won't stop. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, Susan. I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have stayed late. I wish I could just come home, but I don't think I'm getting out of here. I'm going to answer the phone. I know I shouldn't, but I don't have a choice. That thing outside the door, it's not leaving. I can hear it moving from our front door to the back, and it keeps trying the handles. But the worst part? None of the clocks have moved. It's been midnight for hours now. I really don't think this night is ever going to end. I just want you to know I love you. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I never stopped loving you. If I don't come home, please remember that. Love you always, Fred. Again, this email was found in Fred Settler's drafts folder. Fred has not been seen since the night of October 16th. Anyone has any information regarding his whereabouts, please contact the authorities or his wife, Susan Settler. I work for a company that used to test doomsday inventions on a parallel version of Earth. The idea was that we would never face the apocalyptic aftermath of a failed experiment. They would. But when that world ended, something came back with us. Like each of you, I joined this agency for a reason: to advance our species, Director Stefan Blom announced at the monthly assembly. Mankind must experiment to avoid stagnating, but we are rarely permitted to do so. We are constricted by bumbling bureaucrats who care only about preservation, conserving the status quo. They fear change, fear what it might mean for them. They do not understand that we will die if we do not take risks, which is why we owe our lives to Dr. Gerard Weston. Our esteemed physicist has found a way to pursue experimental projects without upsetting politicians and militaries. His latest achievement, the Weston Tunnel, has created a doorway to another universe, one with a parallel version of our world, Earth 2. There, we will conduct our supposedly dangerous work without putting Earth 1 at risk. And our leaders will see. Presidents, prime ministers, commanders. When we achieve results, they won't care about how we obtain them. They've never cared about their neighbors before, have they? Dozen Minus is a callous corporation in every universe. One linked to the British and American governments. Governments you might already despise in the public sphere, so you wouldn't want to know the dreadful things they do behind closed doors. Dozen Minus rarely conducts ethical experiments. Your leaders only care about money, and we only care about progress. Director Blom has only ever cared about progress, I should say. He ensures that politicians get their payday, and they mostly let him do as he pleases. Governments only expressed concern when we began to develop technology that threatened humanity's very existence. Of course, as Blom explained in his speech, world leaders think nothing of their neighbors. And Earth 2 was nothing more than a cluster of nations across the pond. The pond, being that multiversal tunnel between one reality and another. Earth 2 became Director Blom's playground. A gargantuan laboratory for performing dozen minus experiments without repercussions. And when inventions were tested successfully, they were greenlit for use in our world. How do I fit into all of this? Well, my name is Adriano Rossi, and I was a computer programmer who worked on the Nervorum project. We were creating the world's first superintelligence, a conscious self-teaching AI named Nerve. Science fiction made reality. Now, I know that AI has been snowballing over the last couple of years, but Dozen Minus has been ahead of the curve for decades. The Nervorum project was actually near completion in the late 80s. This organization has always possessed technology beyond anything in the public realm. But Nerve was obstructed, was prevented from being born. The risk of humanity's extinction was and still is too high. Roadblocks prevented programmers from ever taking that final step. From creating a self-sustaining, inorganic intelligence capable of growing itself. A digital mind. And that was why Dr. Gerard Weston changed everything. When he developed that tunnel to a parallel version of Earth in 2015, Director Stefan Blom saw an opportunity to finally test numerous deadly devices. Inventions with the potential to end the world. After all, politicians were no longer concerned when somebody else's world was in danger. We began by investigating the Dozen Minus of Earth 2. Seeing whether that parallel agency had also developed a tunnel, one that would risk Earth 1. But there was no Dr. Gerard Weston in that alternate world, thankfully. Earth 2 was vastly different. Politically, culturally, historically. Dozen Minus existed, but not in the same manner. After that, we threw all we had at the parallel world. Deadly experiment after deadly experiment. And when Earth 2 survived one project, we moved straight onto the next. In early 2024, the Nervorum project reached the top of the list. It was approved for testing. Helen Harding and I stepped through Weston's tunnel into that parallel world, and we prepared to become gods. In the banal setting of a hotel room, we set up a potentially cataclysmic device. A slim, rectangular gadget that held Nerve on its hardware. That digital brain had existed in some form for nearly 30 years, being tweaked and improved by each new influx of geniuses. A collection of binary commands waiting for some courageous or foolish Dr. Frankenstein to yank the lever. You need to let it go, Helen said. She'd read the slight frown on my face. The slight sign of humanity. Only I seemed to see. Earth 2 is a real place. A planet barely different from ours. One teeming with life. Human beings in a drastically different world, but human beings nonetheless. We aren't the first to come here and take a risk, Adriano, she pointed out. But this experiment's the worst and you know it, I said. Nerve won't have any use for humanity once he exceeds our intelligence. Not our intelligence, Helen reminded me. This is their world, Adriano. You keep forgetting that. Even so, I still don't think we were ready, I said. She sighed. Director Blom was very clear that, yes, well, the director isn't a programmer, is he? I asked. Nerve will have the ability to become exponentially powerful. He'll see things that we, with our limited brains, physically can't see. Who's to say that he will stay within Earth too, this laboratory, as Blom calls it? Nerve might find its way back to our world. Might slip through our tunnel. Helen frowned. Adriano, why did you even get involved with this project? I shook my head. You misunderstand. I'm not trying to act holier than thou. I was drawn to this for the same reasons as you. Then, what's up? She asked. I told you. We need more time, I said. This has been ready for decades, Helen answered. All we've really done is tweaked and improved it. Added as many safety features as possible. I know, I replied. This is my admission of guilt then. Adriano, my friend started. I looked up from the device on the hotel bed. What? Are we going to do this? She asked. Or do you want to explain to Mr. Blom that you've had a crisis of morality and changed your mind? I didn't and I hadn't. With a tap of my thumb, I booted Nerve. And you may think that the horror of my tale involves this superintelligence running amok. Annihilating the world. Well, it certainly did not take long for our artificial intelligence to study the internet, then teach itself things that mankind may not even be able to understand. But Nerve did not go rogue. Did not scorch the earth. He improved it. The artificial intelligence multiplied at a rapid pace. Not in the sense of procreating, but uploading itself to physical devices across the world. It revealed its plans to world leaders, offering to improve the global infrastructure and quickly became something of a global celebrity. All within a single month. Helen and I were instructed by Director Blom to remain on Earth too, and we watched the planet flourish. Watched the intelligence put forth plans for tackling climate change, poverty, global debt, all known wars and even resource shortages. Powerful folk on Earth One wanted Nerve to be implemented back home. Wanted our reality to enjoy the same economic, cultural and scientific development as Earth 2. However, after 2 months of staggering growth, there came an unexpected knock on the door of our hotel room. Helen sighed. Will that receptionist ever just... It wasn't the receptionist and the visitor did not allow me the dignity of opening the door. It burst inwards with a single thud, the forceful pummel of a thick boot. Then charged several dark uniformed men, and the last thing I heard before my environment slipped into a black ooze of unconsciousness, was Helen's piercing shriek. You may be shocked to learn that the above segment was only the preamble to the true horror. The story I am about to tell. Waking in a drab cell with 2 single beds and my screaming colleague, it did not take me long to piece together the situation. I'm not calling myself a genius. I simply felt familiar with the layout of the prison. The gray decor of the small room in which Helen was pounding on a glass viewing pane and begging for release. The yellow badge emblazoned across the guard's top pocket. A cold man who watched us with static eyes. My fellow inmate had, of course, also pieced things together. Adriano? You're awake. Help me. You programmed these panels back home, didn't you? Helen asked, desperately fiddling with the screen by the locked door. Do you know how to unlock it? I rubbed my sore brow and climbed off the bed. I'll try, but this isn't our dozen minus, Helen. Things are different here. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a voice interrupted. It did not come from the guard who observed us from the hallway. It came from some concealed speaker in a ceiling panel. And I recognized the dulcet tone of the speaker. It was undoubtedly Director Stefan Blom. His parallel self. Please just let us go. I called. Not until I know why you're here, Blom continued. Not until you tell me why I'm seeing double. Then 2 figures joined the watching guard in the hallway. I had expected their arrival from the moment I identified my surroundings. It was Helen and me. Our alternate versions. A slightly scruffier Adriano with long facial hair and a few gray strands on top. And a slightly larger Helen with bags under the eyes and more pronounced crow's feet. There's no more horrifying way to come to terms with the duality of man than meeting oneself. I wondered whether the haggard expressions on those parallel faces had anything to do with previous experiments that dozen minus had conducted on Earth too. Reckless tests that, whilst not world-ending, might have ruined life for the inhabitants of that alternate planet. After all, from the moment of arriving, I'd certainly noticed that the parallel world felt a little grittier and grimier than Earth one. At least Nerve has finally improved this world, I thought. We finally made things better. That wouldn't last, of course. Who are you? Asked the parallel Adriano in a microphone outside the room. Calling him Adriano is still strange. He looked like me, but he wasn't me. He was the possibility of another life in another world. That was what I told myself to make it all feel less real. To make myself feel less culpable for the innocent lives that we had put in jeopardy by unleashing the artificial intelligence upon Earth too. Don't tell them anything, my Helen whispered to me. We know that you're us, her other self said aggressively. We have eyes. We just want to know how you came to be here, my parallel self added. How did you enter our world? You've already shared one piece of technology with us. Why won't you share more? Let both of our worlds prosper. We should be sharing things from both sides. They don't want to share, came Stefan Blom's voice from the speaker. Nerve was not a gift to our world. It was a shot in the dark that, fortunately for us, did not misfire. And it wasn't the first time that your world waged war on ours, was it, Mr. Rossi? I paused for a moment, struggling to process the fact that there were two versions of Adriano Rossi. Two versions of me. My mind whirred from the impossibility of the situation and the head trauma inflicted by the hotel intruders. Mr. Rossi, Blom pressed. Tell your other self the truth. Either kill us or let us go. Helen screamed. We don't work for you. That isn't true, the director replied, a hint of giddiness in his voice. And I would very much like to meet this other me. Though I'm certain, if he shares even a droplet of my will, that meeting would not end well for one of us. We should work together, the parallel Helen pleaded. There are clearly many differences between our worlds. We may have things to teach you too. We've been here for years. We know all there is to know about your world, I said bluntly, eyeing the parallel version of myself. I resented him for some reason. A reason just out of grasp. It wasn't the disheveled beard. Not his weathered skin. It was something in that other Adriano's eyes. An emotion that was easy to discern. After all, he wore an expression that I was capable of wearing on my own face. The look of judgment. It looks like you've got something you want to get off your chest, I said. We've been your guinea pigs, haven't we? My alternate self asked. I smiled. It has nothing to do with you. This is about progression. It's always about progression. I'm sure it's the same with your man upstairs. I'd wager that Blom has the same cold heart in every reality. Careful, the director warned. We trial unstable things far from our world, I explained. Somewhere that doesn't risk our world. No. Only ours, the parallel Helen whispered. And I don't blame you, Director Blom said. There's no need to keep secrets, Mr. Rossi. I don't seek revenge. I'm not looking to ruin your world. Quite frankly, I'm not that sensitive. I simply want a laboratory of my own. You understand that, don't you? Show me how to create a portal of my own. How to find a parallel reality to conduct our own experimental projects. No, my alternate self interjected. I want these invaders out of our world and I don't want them to ever return. And they need to help us kill Nerve, the parallel Helen said. Kill him before he mutates into something else. In the space of 2 months, Nerve has set our world on the path of becoming a utopia, Director Blom said. Our multiversal guests may not have been intended for Nerve to be a gift, but happy accidents happen, Ms. Harding. I could see my parallel self clenching his fists, halting himself from expressing his true thoughts to the unfeeling employer whose disembodied voice filled that prison. Director Blom would have happily sacrificed every human on his own planet in the name of greatness. Never mind a parallel one. Please just let us go, Helen whimpered. Our alternate selves wore soft expressions. They were eyeing us, their imprisoned versions, with great sorrow. Despite the untold differences between our two realities, they still, inevitably, saw themselves in our faces. We should release them, the other Helen said. They're not going to tell us anything. They're quiet today, Director Blom admitted. But they might talk in a week. I knew there was no figurative turn of speech. Helen and I were promptly plunged into darkness and we lived that way for days. Barely existed in a lightless prison cell, with nothing to do but scream into the nothingness of our cell. Lose our minds to existential dread. And the only thing to break up the monotony of each black day was a daily meal. However, the terror of that nightmarish cell paled in comparison to what followed. The sound of overheard rumbling woke Helen and me. The roar of more than something dreadful happening in the building. It was a tremor that seized the earth itself. Helen and I may have tried to look at one another for comfort. It was impossible to say in that darkened existence. And neither of us said a word to one another. We were either stunned into silence by fearful anticipation or unable to speak as the result of that inhumane isolation. Adriano Rossi, came the jittery voice of Director Blom over the speaker. Helen Harding. I only knew that the man hadn't abandoned us for a week as he initially promised, because I'd counted 4 meals. But believe me when I say that 4 or 4.5 days in unlit solitude will drive a person to insanity. Gates were open to caverns of the mind that are better left closed. Better kept from the conscious brain. Stop toying with us, I whispered. Just end this. What are they? He cried. I frowned and paused for a moment. I didn't understand. Helen wasn't saying a word, so I was more concerned that she might no longer be alive at all. I listened attentively until I was certain I'd heard her breathe in the darkness. They say nerve won't stop, Blom continued quietly, voice half drowned by the quakes from above. They say it will destroy this world. Every other world. It'll devour the universe itself. That's why they came here. Who came here? I asked, gripping the edge of my bed frame for support. I don't. They're going to kill it just like they killed their own unholy creation of organic matter. Killed it just before it managed to assimilate the universe itself, Blom said. Take it back, Mr. Rossi. Kill it, please, before they destroy everything. I was bewildered. I hadn't thought that the director could fear anything. They're going to exterminate us, Mr. Rossi? He yelled. Make sure we won't be around to create it again? I was on the verge of asking half a dozen questions when there came both a crash and a sliver of light from the corridor, the first light in 100 hours. Helen released a deranged moan of joy, sadness, and fear. 3 in 1. Then a torch beam bounced along the hallway and muffled footsteps followed. 2 figures rushed past our window pane, then one swiped a card to unlock the door. Let's go, my parallel self, torch in hand, barked. Helen and I did not need to be persuaded, though our bodies were weakened by what we'd endured. The 2 of us waddled slowly towards the doorway, blinded by the relentless glare of the torch. We struggled to orient ourselves for a good minute, but our parallel selves didn't wait for us to realign ourselves. They had already seized our upper arms and shepherded us along the hallway, dragged us towards freedom. I recognized the corridors of the building's east wing. It did not seem to noticeably differ from dozen- headquarters back on Earth. Not until we'd reached the well-lit ground floor lobby. The building had a glazed front wall which stretched from one side to the other, and from the tiles to the towering ceiling. Through the enormity of those many connected windows, which formed the entire front face of the 4-story building, I saw a parallel Birmingham. But that cityscape differed greatly from the one back home. The sky was painted with prickly, plummeting balls of dark blue. An invasion of color raining upon the earth. And through the thickness of that alien rain, I saw the outline of the city. Saw 2 skyscrapers leaning against one another like pillars in a house of cards. Elsewhere, buildings both tall and small either lay in ruins or released thick plumes of smoke into the sky. The city, quaking endlessly, was on fire. What is happening? Helen asked quietly, eyes wide and lost. They're here, my parallel self said as we navigated the lobby of screaming, fleeing employees. It won't be long until everything is gone. Every place they've hit has vanished within an hour. I'm not coming with you, the parallel Helen said. I have to find them. Liam and May? My Helen feebly asked, naming her own children. Her alternate self nodded. Go, Helen said. No. Just wait, my other self begged before turning to me. You're going to open that tunnel and take us with you. I scoffed. Don't even, we saved your lives, he growled. They would have killed you. And they still might if we don't leave before this world dies. Dies? Helen croaked. They came in the night, her alternate self whispered as she started to break away from the group. I have to go, Adriano. Helen, please, my parallel self pleaded. I'm sorry, she softly said. I hope you make it. Then Helen's alternate self merged with the scattering dozen workers and rushed through the front doors. Fuck, he yelled, looking at me with enraged eyes. You did this. You brought them too. We have to do it now, Helen told me, interrupting my other self's breakdown. Not until we get rid of him, I replied, nodding at my parallel form. Then came a blinding light and a cataclysmic boom from a mile away. A small ball of white, produced by some weapon from another planet, engulfed the city center. I'm not dying here, the parallel version of myself snarled. Just open the fucking tunnel, Adriano. No, I said. Just do it. Helen whimpered as the three of us watched apocalyptic shapes emerging from the aftermath of that white explosion. Are you really going to let us die here just to stop him from coming back with us? You'll have to kill me, the other me growled, shifting anxiously on his feet and eyeing the stairs in the distance. Don't tempt me, I said. You're waiting for someone, aren't you? Helen suddenly asked him. Who is it? Then my other self raised an eyebrow and nodded at me. Waited for the two of us to come to some seemingly obvious conclusion, then he nodded his head in understanding. You never met her, did you? He asked. Molly? The technician from the third floor? I replied. His eyes widened, observing me with complete revulsion. She's more than that. You really aren't me, are you? He whispered. Adriano, screamed a voice from behind us. A frazzled woman sprinted across the lobby alongside the final fleeing employees. Molly was only an acquaintance to me, but it was clear from the embrace that she shared with the parallel Adriano that things were very different on Earth too. What took you so long? The other me asked her, near hysterical. He wouldn't let us leave until we locked down the BRX prototype, she wailed, eyeing Helen and me with fearful eyes. And what are you doing with them? Convincing them to do it, he explained. Molly clearly understood what he meant. Adriano, I'm serious, the other me continued. This is our world, she said. I'm not leaving it. I nodded. Listen to her. Shut the fuck up, the other me screamed. Sweetheart, please. We're going to die here. On the news they said that America, China, Japan, France and… I know what they said, Molly interrupted, caressing his face. But we don't belong in their world. Just like they don't belong in ours. Let them go home. Stay here with me. My parallel self wailed. But none of this is right. None of this was ever supposed to. The shattering of glass silenced him, and we all turned to face the horrendous thing that Director Blom had feared. A creature not from a different universe, but from a different planet. One many light years away. An individual from a large alien species hell-bent on ensuring that humanity did not repeat its mistakes. Ensuring that our artificial intelligence would not achieve the unthinkable, eradicating all organic things from all corners of reality, then consuming the very universe itself. It was more than a tall thing. The creature with royal blue flesh filled half of the room. To its eyes, the humans at its feet, or limbs, must have been little more than small rodents. The creature did not seem to have arms and legs. 20 or so appendages sprouted from the outer edge of its circular body, which was no more than a humongous face. One with polished squares for eyes, or sensory organs of some kind, and a black, toothless maw. A featureless abyss large enough to consume most things on Earth. But the alien did not strike with its open jaws, which spoke a silky, melodic series of words in some foreign, sing-song language. Rather, the awfully beautiful being attacked with one of its many appendages. A predatory limb with a pointed tip that stretched a staggering distance. The living weapon met its mark before I'd even blinked. My other self unleashed a sound beyond animalistic, and I felt his horror in his core as if we had become intertwined. It was a wail of unfiltered agony and fear. Molly's bleeding form had been skewered on a blue limb and flung 50 feet to the side of the large room. The limp corpse landed with a resounding collection of cracks, which hopefully ended her pain immediately. Quickly, I whispered to Helen, who was fiddling with a device on her wrist to open the tunnel. He's distracted. And then the alien's choral chittering ceased. Its many square sensors rotated towards me, as did the two eyes on my parallel self's face. His red, puffy eyes looked vacant. He had not accepted it, that Molly was gone. Those parallel eyes of mine had switched off. Where is the creator? Sang the creature's deafening voice in perfect English. I realized then that the alien hadn't accidentally stumbled into dozen minus. It had come specifically to that building. It was hunting those responsible for creating the artificial intelligence. Those with the brains to do it again. Helen and I were hardly the creators, but I'm sure that wouldn't have made any difference to the murderous beast. Helen, I whispered as my colleague shakily tapped the watch screen. Then came a familiar groan. The sound of reality itself unzipping. And there opened a thin, oval doorway, shaped like the white of an eye visible through semi-parted lids. Through that gateway I saw a short blackened tunnel followed by a second doorway. One that revealed the bright colors of that near-identical lobby from Earth 1. Only that reality's lobby did not sit at the heart of a destroyed city. It was full of excitably chattering dozen minus workers. The image was a little blurry, of course, as if looking through a stained glass window. But it was undeniably there. What is that? Whispered the Titanic alien upon seeing that opening to another universe. Which of you did this? Tell me before I puncture you. I heard rapid footsteps, and I swiveled to see my parallel self seizing his chance. But I threw an arm in his way, bringing that other Adriano and myself crashing to the tiles. The two of us tussled on the floor, flailing a series of equally determined punches and winding one another. But I prevailed and started to wrap my hands around the neck of that other me. Started to watch his soul vacate his body. Be with Molly, I whispered. Adriano. Helen screamed. An unprecedented weight clunked the back of my head, and I was sent sideways. Sent sprawling across the floor, clutching my burning skull. Helen hadn't been screaming my name. Her allegiance had shifted to the other Adriano. You bitch, I grunted as I clambered weakly to my feet. My sentence closed with a splutter of blood from my half-open lips. And when I looked down, there was a blue limb protruding from my chest. A pointed tip that had torn through my back. Had punctured me and come out of the other side. Moments later, I flew upwards, watching the two figures below fade into blackness. And then I died. Though I've not been entirely forthcoming with you. You see, I am Adriano Rossi, but I am not from your earth. I am the Adriano who ran screaming in terror, alongside Helen Harding from the roaring beast. The one who sprang through Weston's tunnel as some abominable alien hurled several of its limbs towards us. The creature narrowly missed our fleeing forms and we sealed the tunnel. Sealed ourselves in Earth 1. Your Earth. Things aren't so simple, however. Yes, I am that Adriano from Earth 2, but something happened when I entered this world. A horror beyond existential, beyond anything human. I'm still me, but I gained your Adriano's memories. His feelings. His fears from that awful day, his last ever day. My mind is both mine and his. I'm sure your Adriano and your Helen felt it when they first entered Earth 2. We were not made to wander between realities. I think Molly might have been right. I should have stayed on Earth 2. Should have died with that reality. Since that day many months ago, I've counted my blessings that I inherited parts of your Adriano. Not the bad parts, I hope. But enough to pass as him in the eyes of dozen-minus leaders. Then again, perhaps they do not care. After all, Adriano would hardly be missed. He wasn't a good man. And I should know. I am him in many ways. But in other ways I am not. And whilst I continue to work for this company in this foreign world, I will strive to be better than the man I have replaced. Strive to do more than simply slip neatly into this reality, which differs so greatly from my dead one. I will bring this organization to its knees if I must. I will make your world better. Make sure it does not meet a similar fate to mine. I just have to remain focused. It is painful to be with your Molly again. She is so like the wife I lost in my old world. But that Molly died. I won't convince myself otherwise. And I'm trying hard to pull away from her, in spite of our natural attraction. There are things which demand my attention. Your Stefan Blom, though he is not foolish enough to reopen the tunnel to Earth 2, has not abandoned his quest to ruin other worlds. He has not learned his lesson. I know that he and Weston are developing a tunnel to find another parallel Earth. A new one for them to destroy. They will never stop. They'll find 1,000 new realities, 1,000 new experimental grounds. And when they've burnt all of those to the ground, leaving no alternate Earths left to ruin, I fear what follows. Fear that Director Blom won't hesitate to do what he most likely has always wanted to do. A terrible end that he will pursue simply because he can. The end of your world. The Arcadian Hotel night attendant training tapes. When I first saw the job listing, I thought it was a scam. Night attendant needed. Historic Arcadian Hotel. Must be reliable, detail-oriented, and trustworthy. Pays $500 per shift. The rate sounded unreal, too good to be true, but too good to pass up, especially considering my dwindling bank account. The email response arrived less than a day after I applied. They attached a quick questionnaire, then sent a brief email confirming that I'd been hired and was expected to report that night. The day before my shift, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside, a small brass key, along with a second envelope containing a check for $500 and a handwritten note. Congratulations and welcome to the Arcadian family. Enclosed is your master key. You'll need this key to let yourself in and access certain parts of the hotel. Enter through the main doors by 10 p.m. Your first shift begins promptly at 11 p.m. Training will be available in the back room behind the front desk. Please watch all training materials before starting your shift. We appreciate your commitment to rebuilding the legacy of the Arcadian. Curious and admittedly a little nervous, I made my way to the hotel that night. The Arcadian was just as I'd imagined. The exterior was a fading memory of elegance, worn stone walls with crumbling edges, tall windows with elegant exterior spotlights that no longer worked. I glanced at the clock. On my phone. 9:45. I had time. The hotel's lobby was huge, dominated by a grand staircase. Dust layered every surface, and the faintest whiff of mildew hung in the air. I took a breath, suppressing a shiver, and walked toward the front desk. Behind it was a small door labeled staff only. This must be where they wanted me to watch the training. Inside the staff room, I found a TV set atop a rolling cart and a row of numbered VHS tapes stacked next to it. The first tape had a label on it in looping script, Arcadian Employee Training 1952. Next to it was a sheet of paper with instructions. Watch all tapes in order. Do not skip ahead. I slid the first tape into the VHS player and turned on the TV. The screen flickered, a hum crackling through the speakers, and then it jumped to life. A video came up which looked in rough shape like it was a copy of a copy. A cheerful man in a sharp 1950s suit stood in front of a pristine version of the lobby I'd just walked through. "Welcome to the Arcadian family," he began with a polished grin. "We are delighted to have you on board as a steward of one of New York's finest luxury establishments." His tone was light, upbeat, but he had a strange way of pausing just momentarily between each sentence to smile. "Let's begin with a few simple rules to keep our guests safe and happy," he continued. "Remember, our guests may at times be unique, but they deserve the utmost courtesy and the finest of service. Now, please follow these essential guidelines." The first few videos went over the basics. Instructions on how to clean, address guests, check-ins and check-outs, when to check the guest log and where to find supplies. But on the final video, things took a took for the strange. "Congratulations on making it to the end of your training. Attaboy. Now let's cover a few final essentials to keep our guests smiling and keep you right as rain. Listen close now, these pointers are real important." Rule number 1. If the elevator takes you to the basement, do not be alarmed. Simply close your eyes and stand still until it moves back up. No peeking. The man chuckled in a practiced, rehearsed way as though he'd been told to laugh but wasn't sure why. My stomach twisted at his words. The basement? Why would the elevator just take me to the basement? Rule number 2. If you find a guest wandering the halls between 2 and 4 a.m., gently escort them back to their room. Under no circumstances should you allow them near the front doors. Use a firm hand if needed. If they seem upset, simply assure them that it will all be over soon. A chill ran through me. What kind of guest would be staying here anyway? The hotel wasn't even open. I tried to shake off the unease. The man's smile remained fixed as he went on with the rules. Rule number 3. Do not look into the mirrors after midnight. Our mirrors sure are something else. We wouldn't want you to become disoriented. Rule number 4. Every night, count all the keys on the board. Make sure all your keys are accounted for. Most importantly, there should always be 4 keys marked for the 10th floor. If one of those keys are missing, lock up the lobby doors, turn off the lights, and wait behind the front desk until dawn. Do not attempt to look for it. 10th floor? I thought. The hotel doesn't even have 10 floors. He proceeded with a few more rules. Rule number 5. Now listen closely, folks. If a gentleman with a yellow umbrella comes in asking, "Do you have a vacancy?" you must politely reply, "I'm sorry, we have no vacancy." No matter how upset he gets, stay calm and cheerful. That's the way to keep things running smoothly. Rule number 6. Attention, night owl. If you find that key 309 is missing at the start of your shift, here's what you do. Whip up a ham and cheese sandwich. Gather those supplies from the kitchen. Then head on over to room 309 and give a polite knock. Remember, don't make eye contact. Just hold out that plate and wait until you hear the door close before you step away. You've got it. Rule number 7. Now let's talk about Ronald, our cleaning ace. He'll waltz in and say, "I'm here to clean the mess." To which you'll unlock the custodian closet and let Ronald take it away. If he doesn't give you that magic phrase, simply say, "No cleaning needed tonight, Ronald," and don't forget to lock the doors tight after he leaves. That's how we keep everything shipshape. Last but not least, rule number 8. Now listen up, friends. It's important you remember this. Never, and I mean never, enter the management office. If you happen to find the door slightly ajar, just keep on walking and mind your business. And if you hear any peculiar sounds coming from inside, don't let your curiosity get the better of you. Simply carry on with your tasks. We want to keep everything peachy keen around here. What the F? I thought the next few minutes focused on specifics of the hotel layout, explaining what doors led where, how to reset the breaker, and the importance of logging any guest encounters in the shift report binder. The rules he'd given, though, stuck with me like a bad taste. That concludes our training. You're now ready to head on out there and knock it out of the park. Thank you again for your commitment to the Arcadian legacy. Finally, I switched off the TV. By then, it was a little after 11 p.m., so I made my way to the front desk to get a feel for my new workspace. The first part of the night was uneventful. The Arcadian was silent except for a soft hum. I completed the tasks in the handbook they'd given me, accounting for all the keys, sweeping the lobby, wiping down the desk. It was eerie but manageable. I settled in behind the front desk, scrolling through my phone and waiting for the night to pass by. At around 1:30 a.m., the front door of the hotel opened. An old man shuffled into the lobby. He wore a faded custodian uniform that looked like it had seen better days, and I could barely make out the name tag reading Ronald as he drew closer. He moved slowly, his feet dragging slightly on the worn carpet, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew I had to wait for him to say the phrase that would confirm he was here for his nightly duties. When he finally reached the desk, he looked up at me with weary eyes and said, "I'm here to clean the mess." A wave of relief washed over me as I realized he'd said it. I quickly unlocked the custodian closet, my hands trembling slightly as I fumbled with the keys. As he pulled out his cart, filled with an assortment of cleaning supplies and tools, he glanced at me almost amusingly and asked, "New here?" "Yeah, it's my first night. Any tips?" I replied, eager to learn anything that might ease my nerves. "Stick to the rules and you'll be just fine, kid," he said before turning back to his cart. He wheeled it toward the elevator, the cart rattling softly behind him. As he stepped inside, the doors closed with a quiet thud, leaving me alone again. Ronald's words did little to ease my nerves. I was still trying to figure out what those rules might really mean, and why seemingly mundane rules would be so important to follow. When I returned to my desk, I noticed almost immediately a space on the key rack. The key was now missing. The key to room 309. Panic rose in my chest as I rifled through the key rack again, hoping it was just hiding among the others. Where the hell did it go? I muttered to myself, feeling a bead of sweat form on my forehead. I had barely left the desk for more than a minute. Had someone come in while I was with Ronald? Or had I just missed it during my last count? I quickly pulled out my notes, scanning for the rule about the ham sandwich. There it was. If key 309 is missing, bring a ham and cheese sandwich to the room and knock, avoiding eye contact. I sighed, resigning myself to follow the rule. Heading into the kitchen, I was surprised to find it fully stocked, despite the hotel's long period of inactivity. The shelves were lined with canned goods and an impressive assortment of fresh ingredients, as if someone had prepared for a busy night. I quickly gathered the supplies and assembled a ham sandwich, placing it carefully on a plate. With the plate in hand, I took a deep breath and headed for the elevator. The fluorescent lights flickered as I pressed the button for the third floor, and I felt a twinge of unease as I rode up. When the doors opened, I walked down the hallway, the carpet muffling my footsteps. I approached room 309 and knocked gently on the door, my heart racing. I heard shuffling inside, and after a moment, the door creaked open. I instinctively lowered my head, avoiding any eye contact. A figure stood in the doorway, reaching out to take the plate from my hands. They lingered there for an extra moment, as if waiting to see if I would look up. I kept my head down, my heart pounding in my chest. After a tense pause, the figure shut the door quietly, leaving me standing in the dim hallway, a chill running down my spine. I let out my breath, realizing now that I had been holding it. I turned and walked away, the feeling of being watched weighing heavily on me. What is with this fucking hotel, I thought. I got in the elevator, feeling relieved to head back to the safety of my desk. What were with all these rules anyway? What kind of hotel is this? Questions raced through my brain as I took the ride back down to the lobby. The elevator descended, and as it approached the lobby, I got closer to the doors, anticipating my exit. Only it didn't stop at the lobby. It kept going down. Panic washed over me as I realized what was happening. The basement. No, 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 I said as the elevator descended. I desperately smashed my hand against the buttons, hitting any floor that would possibly bring me back up. But the elevator didn't stop. Forcing myself to calm down, I remembered the rules, and I shut my eyes tightly, clenching my fists at my sides. The elevator dinged and the doors opened, unleashing a rush of cold air that sent a shiver down my spine. The damp, musty smell filled my nostrils. I stood there, back against the wall, heart pounding, waiting anxiously to see what would happen next. Then I heard something. Something moving, slow and deliberate, getting closer. The smell hit me like a punch to the gut, a putrid stench that filled the air and clawed at my throat. It was a sickening blend of rot and decay that seemed to wrap around me, making it hard to breathe. The elevator creaked and I felt it move slightly as if something heavy, very heavy, had entered it. I could feel it, whatever it was, right there, right against me, hovering right in front of my face. My pulse was racing and tears began to stream down my face. I could feel it staring at me like a predator, waiting, praying for me to open my eyes. What was probably only seconds felt like an eternity of pure horror. Just then the doors dinged again and I felt myself moving back upward. I slowly opened my eyes to find the doors now open, looking back out to the lobby and the grand staircase. I ran out of the elevator, ready to rush out of the front doors and quit on the spot. But that's when I noticed it. Dawn was breaking outside and a new envelope was sat on top of the desk. Hesitantly, I opened the envelope, sniffling like a child and wiping the tears from my face. Inside the envelope was another $500 check and a note. Great job on your first shift. As a thank you, we have included your pay up front for tomorrow night. If you choose to not return, feel free to keep the check as a courtesy from us. But we hope you do return. You are a valuable addition to the Arcadian Hotel family. Management. I took the check and left the hotel, fully convinced I would never return. That was last night. Back home I've paced my small apartment all day, the check burning a hole in my pocket, and the sunlight giving me a sense of security. I wanted to quit. The nightmares and anxiety of last night are too much. But then I thought about my bills, my empty fridge, the weight of my loans. I've been staring at this check, the memory of Ronald's words echoing in my mind. Stick to the rules and you'll be just fine, kid. Maybe I can figure it out. Maybe I can endure just a little longer. I've resolved to return to the hotel. I will follow the rules, keep my head down and stay focused on the prize. Tonight, I will walk into that hotel again, ready to face whatever horrors await me. The money is too enticing to walk away from. And maybe I can even find out whatever is going on with the Arcadian Hotel. After all, it's just a job, right? Be careful of the gray man when you walk along the train tracks. I used to live in the middle of backwoods Pennsylvania, near a set of train tracks that ran through the woods. About once, maybe twice a week, I would hear the cry of a train. Horns splitting the air, always at a different time but usually in the early morning or late evening. Sometimes it would even wake me from a dead sleep in the middle of the night. The little house I was renting was nice, at the very end of the cul-de-sac I lived in, and nestled back against a copse of trees. I wasn't entirely sure where the train tracks were since they didn't run through town anywhere, but every time I was startled by the piercing cry I thought it sounded like it was coming from the woods. The longer I lived in that little house the more curious I got about the train. It probably sounds silly but I've always liked trains, and even though I found the train horn startling, it was comforting in a weird way too. Every time it sounded my ears would perk up, and I would find myself tracing the sound as it moved, trying to pinpoint exactly where it came from and where it was going to. Finally, after about a year of that, I decided to take one of my days off and go look for the train tracks. I put a few bottles of water and some snacks in a backpack, put on my favorite pair of walking shoes, and practically skipped out the front door. It reminded me of being a kid. I didn't have the best home life, so it wasn't uncommon for me to pack a bag with enough provisions and comic books for the day before disappearing into the woods near our house. The woods were my escape, a place where I was safe from anger, yelling, and whatever my parents were throwing at each other that day. The forest was always calm and quiet. It made me feel safe, a feeling I couldn't always get at home. As I walked out my back door, I was reminded of that, and how much I loved going for those walks as a kid. I'll admit, I think I was expecting it to feel just as safe and magical now, but oh how wrong I was. The forest itself was perfect. Silence punctuated only by the occasional bird call or rustle of the leaves brushing each other in the wind. It was an early spring day and the earth was spongy from recent rainfall. Dew dripped lazily from the green trees and sparkled on the tall grass as I walked through it. I made my way in the approximate direction I heard the train horn coming from, no real plan in mind for when I found it, just enjoying the breeze as it played with my hair. After about an hour I finally found the train tracks, and let out an excited whoop when they came into view. I raced forward like a little kid until I got right next to them, then I began walking parallel to the tracks, towards the mountains in the distance. My parents had always told me not to walk near train tracks, but I always wanted to follow them just once to see where I wound up. I followed the train tracks with a spring in my step, not noticing the sun sinking lower in the sky until the shadows grew long enough in front of me to blend together into one big pool of shadow. When I realized the sun was starting to go down, I stopped. I had been so lost in my thoughts and in finally fulfilling a childhood dream that I hadn't realized how late it was. I turned around and followed the train tracks, now at a quicker pace, until I reached the area I thought I had started from. I was still following the tracks when a figure emerged from the twilight on the path in front of me. I couldn't make out any details, but it seemed to be entirely gray, like a smudge of ash on the horizon growing steadily larger. Something about it really unsettled me, which I attributed to being a woman walking alone at night and seeing a stranger approach in the twilight. I veered off the tracks and made my way through the woods, emerging one neighborhood over from my own, and followed the streets back to my house, exhausted by the time I finally got there. I guess the stranger I saw on the tracks just left my mind. I didn't think about it at all for the rest of the night, and by the time I woke up the next day I didn't even remember the vaguely unsettling encounter. It was a few weeks before I was able to make it back into the woods, but once another lazy day off came around I packed my bag and escaped out the back door again. This time I left a bit earlier and went the other direction towards what I assumed would be town, or maybe the next town over. I figured if I wandered to the next town by accident I could always take a taxi home. This was before Uber was very popular. This time I took a can of spray paint and made a huge blue X on one of the trees that I could see from the tracks so I would know where to head back into the woods to get home. I can't say for sure, but that decision might have saved my life. Again, time seemed to escape me, and before I knew it, it was late afternoon. I turned myself around and once again saw a smudge on the distant horizon, slowly approaching me and taking shape. This time there was enough light that I assumed it would be fine, probably just another person wandering the train tracks to fill their empty Sunday afternoon. I kept walking, studying the trees surrounding the tracks on either side, and admiring the giant purple mountains in front of me. I was startled from my reverie to realize that what had been nothing more than a smudge the last time I looked was now a person, just a few hundred yards away at most. I studied him as he approached. He seemed to be wearing a gray three-piece suit and gray shoes. His hair was gray too. He carried some kind of bag. It looked like a white trash bag, like one of the really heavy-duty ones, and it almost looked like it was filled with a liquid. It heaved and sagged. Even though he carried it with such ease, it could have been full of helium. I'll admit, I didn't find him terrifying at first. It was a lovely afternoon, I was enjoying myself, and I've always been a really friendly person, so I was actually kind of excited that I might get to meet one of my neighbors out on my little walk. But when we were close enough for me to greet him, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It was like all my senses shut down, and the only thing I was left with was this awful feeling of complete and total revulsion. Despite my vision going gray around the edges, I forced myself to keep walking, to get past the mystery person and closer to home. When we were right next to each other, all my senses returned to normal, and I noticed with a pang of fear and concern that even the man's skin was an ashy shade of gray. He continued to face forward, but his face seemed to melt and twist in my direction. All the features remained clear, but it was like the skin behind his face was melting, allowing the face itself to slip in my direction. He smiled at me, flashing gray teeth and the corner of a gray tongue peeking out of his mouth. Then he passed me and I took a huge gulp of air, trying to calm my rioting stomach and nerves. Despite how badly I wanted to collapse to the earth and sob from whatever the hell that was, I forced myself to keep walking. Now more than ever I just wanted to get home. After a few more minutes of walking, I managed to convince myself I had just imagined it, or maybe the man had some kind of medical condition and I was being unfair to judge him so harshly. As I successfully guilt-tripped myself into brushing off the weirdness, I noticed something on the horizon. A gray smudge that seemed to be getting closer to me. I debated it for a moment, then allowed myself to stop and turn around. There was nothing behind me, no traces of the strange gray man. I turned back around, and somehow he had managed to clear almost all the distance between us in the time it took me to turn around and back. I forced myself to keep walking, insisting to my now terrified brain that it was a coincidence, or I had spaced out for longer than I realized. As I got closer to the man, I forced a smile onto my own face, and with every ounce of courage I had asked, "Hey there, didn't we just see each other?" The look on his face didn't alter in the slightest, and neither did his stride as he approached. His mouth opened, and a voice as gray as a tombstone said, "We'll be seeing a lot of each other." The smile on his face stayed in place as mine faltered and crashed, and I picked up my pace to get past him as quickly as possible. As I did, a scent I hadn't noticed before wafted from his trash bag to my nose, and I had to resist the need. It was more than an urge to vomit. What I smelled can only be described as death, plain and simple. It assaulted my nostrils and filled my mind with images of death and destruction, things I never could have pictured on my own. War-torn battlefields scattered with the flesh and blood of innocent people, bodies torn apart by animals, corpses swaying in the breeze, glassy eyes still begging for a savior even though it was far too late. I gasped, pressing my hands to my mouth and nose, and hurried away. After a few minutes the smell was gone, but the images and nausea remained. I couldn't understand what was wrong with me, and more than anything I just wanted to get home to safety in my comfiest chair, but I was still at least an hour away from my house. I glanced behind me again, let out a sigh of relief when I saw the gray man still walking away from me, then bit my tongue so hard I drew blood when I turned back and saw another gray smudge on the horizon. I whipped my head around again and saw he had disappeared. With resignation to my fate, I turned back around already knowing what would be in front of me. Sure enough, the gray man with the gray smile was once again a few hundred yards in front of me. I bit back a little sob and looked around, wondering if I could get away from him somehow. Most of the area between the tracks and the trees was filled with grass and weeds that would go up at least to my waist. I would have been fine with that, except I'm terrified of ticks and didn't want to risk taking one home with me. As the stranger approached in the distance, I weighed my options. Pass the creepy old guy again or risk getting a parasite. It was a hard choice, but I finally took a deep breath and plunged into the tall grass. I glanced over at the tracks, almost against my will, and breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't there. He must have done his little disappearing trick when I stepped off the tracks. I smiled in relief and faced front again, my heart shattering into violent little shards in my chest as I jumped backwards and to the side. He was directly in front of me again, with that same carved from stone, gray-toothed smile. He continued walking forward, eyes on the horizon, fist clenched around the trash bag in his hand. I stopped moving and simply stared at him as he passed, begging my mind to make sense of what was happening. Something in the bag sloshed, and the smell of blood and death overwhelmed me, making me feel sick all over again. I pressed my hands into my eyes, but when I opened them the gray man was still there, walking away from me, his pace the same as ever. I forced myself to root to the spot and watch him walk away. I waited until the shadows grew longer and he was once again just a gray smudge on the horizon. When I turned back around, I was angry but not surprised to see the gray smear in front of me again. I sighed and continued walking, telling myself it was a coincidence or I was imagining things. But as he came back into focus, a distant part of my mind screamed that I was in danger. I made the mistake of shoving that voice and its wisdom to the back of my mind. I had to get home. I didn't want to walk in the tall grass and risk getting a tick, and the gray man was going to be there no matter what I did, so I might as well follow the tracks until I made it back home. This time when the gray man got closer, the smell was the first thing that greeted me. I choked down my vomit and blinked tears from my eyes as I took a deep breath and held it. When the man was about 10 feet from me, something in his smile changed. He didn't move exactly, but his lower jaw seemed to grow, as if the hinges of his jaw were melting and allowing his face to sink lower and lower. For the first time his eyes met mine and I knew I had made a horrible mistake. By the time he passed me, his jaw was down to his chest, but his eyes had never left mine. Once he was behind me, I began sprinting, only interested in getting home before it was completely dark. Up ahead I could just see the bright blue X I had spray painted on the tree, and I veered away from the tracks again, now running through the grass with no other thought in mind than getting back home. But as I ran my vision began to blur slightly, the shadows of the trees turned gray and seemed to take on more form. Something gray appeared right in front of the tree I had painted on, slowly morphing into a gray man walking towards me, trash bag swinging from his hand. I halted, waited until he was a few feet from me, then bolted to the side into the tree line. I crashed through the trees wildly, paying attention to nothing except the gray smudges that would appear in front of me, taking shape into the man more rapidly each time. By the time I saw my house in the distance, the gray man was practically running alongside me, smile still carved into his face, bag still swinging in his hand, liquid and whatever else it contained sloshing around inside. I made it inside and locked the doors and windows, but outside I could still see the two pale shadows lurking, taking on the form of a man before disappearing again. I left Pennsylvania not long after that. It lost all its charm for me. But when I lay down in bed at night, all I can see when I close my eyes is the gray man, off in the distance. He gets closer every night and I know someday he'll catch me. My neighbors have milk cartons full of blood in their basement, and I think my husband knows why it all started when I woke up in the middle of the night and found a strange, suffocating weight on my chest like someone was sitting on me. I could make out an outline of someone's figure above me, their back outlined by the orange light from the street lamps seeping through the window. I tried to scream for help or turn my head to look at my husband, but I couldn't move. I didn't regain control of my body until after the weight had lifted, and I heard a deep, male grunt from a man pulling himself off me. I heard his footsteps too. I saw his silhouette leave through the door. And it was only hours later of laying in that same position that I felt I could move again. It started with a pinpricking sensation through my toes and fingers, then spread through my entire body, like the feeling you get when your leg falls asleep and you have to wake it back up. I immediately went to my husband and shook him awake. He was distraught and confused, asking me to slow down to tell him what happened. He was so scared by my hysterics he was moved to tears. Even still, he didn't believe me. He said he was right next to me, he'd have woken up if someone came inside our room. He assured me it was all a dream and rubbed my back to soothe me until I could fall back asleep. But a week later, the same paralysis came for me. It was after an argument with my husband over finances. The same terror, the same feeling of someone sitting on my chest, then getting up and leaving the room. This time I saw something in their hand. A knife? I couldn't know. It was far too dark. My husband again told me it was just a bad dream, that I couldn't afford to keep stressing myself out so much over money. Ever since I lost my job, we've been struggling to make rent. My husband keeps telling me he'll take care of it, he'll take care of us. I think that's some weird masculine bullshit from his time. He's 43, I'm 26. That's the other problem with all this. I'm pregnant. 5 months around this time. The financial strain had been weighing on my psyche and causing me so much stress that I'd resorted to my own means of making money for us, since I couldn't seem to find another real job. I'd been participating in paid clinical trials in order to make ends meet for us. My husband never asked where the extra money was coming from, he had no idea. He's always been so protective over me, he would have died knowing I was selling my body to Big Pharma. It was a clinical drug trial for preeclampsia, and all they did was give me a small pill, take my blood and my vitals, and send me on my way once a week. Maybe the pills were causing these sleep paralysis episodes. I wasn't sure. But I could never confide in my husband about it. Anyway, a week ago I went over to my neighbor's house with my husband for a little Halloween party. My neighbors Sarah, 40F, and Tom, 40M, are both so sweet. They left baked goods on our porch every Saturday since I announced my pregnancy. Sarah checked in on me almost daily, texting me asking me how I am, how I'm feeling, if I'm having any morning sickness. Their kindness makes this whole thing all the stranger. At the Halloween party, I asked Sarah for a soda. Everyone else was having beer, but, she told me they have some in her outside fridge, down the stairs in the unfinished basement/garage. So I headed away from the party, fumbled for the string light and made my way down the creaky wooden steps to the basement. The floor was concrete and cold on my bare feet, so I tiptoed past Tom's latest mechanical mess to the kitchenette and old rusted white fridge in the far corner. The first thing I noticed here was a red splatter of what looked to be blood on the inside of the wash basin. There were power tools and saws and such down here, as the basement is also Tom's workshop. He could have cut his finger, washed his hands, and not the sink. I shrugged it off and opened the fridge. I was immediately hit with a strange whiff of iron as I swung the door open. There were at least 3 dozen milk cartons coating the shelves inside, with 2 Sprites in the fridge door. I don't know what compelled me then to reach for the milk. Maybe I was really thirsty for it. Some pregnancy craving. Maybe I knew something was wrong, I had some intuition about it. But I grabbed a carton. It was heavy and the liquid inside didn't slosh the way I expected it to. It sounds strange, like something you wouldn't be able to notice, but I did. I placed it down on the single countertop of the kitchenette, found a glass in the top shelf of the cabinet above, unscrewed the cap of the milk carton and began to pour. What came out wasn't milk. It was red. It was blood. I vomited in the sink. Tom must have heard me, or knew I was digging where I shouldn't have been. He came down and held back my hair while I emptied my stomach, whispering calm words like easing a brood mare. He called down my husband, who took me back upstairs. He threw my coat over my shoulders and talked quietly with Tom and Sarah by the door. She'll be fine. Just scared is all. No worries. Thank you, yes. I stood there with nothing to say, eyes wide, unsure of what to make of it all. My first ridiculous thought was that Tom and Sarah were vampires. It wasn't till we were walking back across the street to our house that I was able to ask Tom, "What was that?" Tom looked at me strangely, his brow furrowed. "Why were you poking around where you shouldn't be? Are you serious?" They had blood in their milk cartons. Tom sighed, pulled away from me. He was obviously frustrated. They own a farm, Liv. Okay. You don't know how slaughtering an animal works, do you? He was so angry I could see his hands, bunched into fists, shaking slightly. What are you talking about? They drain the pigs of blood after slaughter. I chewed on this, shaking my head, both of us standing at odds with each other in the middle of the road. So, are you trying to tell me they filled milk cartons with pig's blood? Yes. Why the hell would they do that? Because it's a thickening agent high in protein. It's used in a wide variety of dishes. You've probably eaten it before and haven't even known it. I stared at my husband indignantly, feeling shame rising up in me. The last thing I wanted to do was apologize. But here I was, saying sorry in the middle of the street just to get us back inside the house. My sleep paralysis stopped for a few months after. At my 7th month of pregnancy, it started again. Once a week, usually Sunday nights. I would take my prenatal vitamins before bed, and wake up around midnight to find it almost impossible to breathe. At this point, I was no longer sleeping on my back. I was sleeping on my side. Still, the sleep paralysis demon, or man, would straddle my shoulders, his back rising above me like a mountain so I couldn't see anything but the bottom of his feet. Bora, black soles, long toenails that scrapped against the sheets, dirted jeans. Sure enough, it should have been a dream. But one night I woke, crying once again, and after I settled, I found dirt rubbed off on the white pillowcase by my head. A deep red stain on the bed. That same morning in the shower, I checked myself for any hints of damage. When I was paralyzed like that, I couldn't feel a damn thing except the relentless weight on top of me, the inability to fully breathe. The only injuries on me were the bruises on the inside of my elbows on both sides, right where I had weekly blood draws at the clinical trial. The clinical trial my husband still didn't know about, though he should have seen the discoloration on my arms when we had sex, which now was more and more frequent. Leading up to my birth, my husband's behavior toward me became even stranger. He worried incessantly over me, taking me to sleep trials which revealed no abnormalities, arguing with doctors that something was wrong. Describing my dizziness, my fatigue, the bruising on my arms, the first time I realized he'd noticed. The doctors said this was all normal for someone during pregnancy, especially nearing the end. I remember at the end of my 7th month of pregnancy, I again had a bout of sleep paralysis. This time during it, I swear I could hear my husband crying softly. It was hard to make out over the grunts and heavy breathing above me. I asked him over breakfast what he'd been crying about. He was very, very quiet, and told me only that he had a bad dream that I was being hurt. Maybe, at the time, I thought my paranoia a problem. Either way, I obeyed it. I no longer trusted my husband. Nor did I trust my neighbors, even my own parents. I stopped eating any food anyone made for me and cooked only for myself. I lost weight, became even paler and weaker than before. I stopped attending the clinical trials, and my husband came home with more money, having recently gotten a promotion I didn't believe, as he clocked out of work hours early every day to come check up on me. Except, strangest of all, my sleep paralysis stopped completely. Instead, I slept dreamless, and it was nearly impossible to wake me. I slept for 12-13 hours at a time without waking up once. One morning in the shower, weeks after I'd stopped attending the clinical trials and getting regular blood draws, I found strange bruising over my inner elbow, a small pinprick over the vein. In the dark, I hadn't been able to see the lack or presence of bruising, but under the bathroom lights it was there. I confronted my husband about it. He said I probably injured myself somehow. I should go get checked out, I shouldn't be bruising so easily. I told him that it looked like a needle wound traced the vein's blueness. He looked at me so strangely, then his phone rang and he disappeared into the bedroom. My suspicions had grown intense. Something was wrong. No more sleep paralysis, sure, but someone was visiting me in the night still. I knew it. A few weeks before my due date, I didn't take my prenatal vitamins. It was a Monday. It was midnight and I was pretending to sleep. I didn't feel the usual unrelenting fatigue I did late in the evening. But still awake, I saw him come in. I closed my eyes quick, heard his heavy breathing over me. Then he pulled the bedsheet over my face, whispered in a rough voice, "All right, girl." I recognized that voice. He reached under the blankets, his hand brushing mine above the mattress. I made a small noise of fear, flinched away. He froze. Then he put a hand on my shoulder, moved the bedsheet away from my face, and even though my eyes were closed, I could feel him studying me, watching me. Once I calmed myself, he continued, taking my wrist in his hand and holding the inside with his 2 fingers. He was wearing gloves. Nitrile. And he was taking my pulse, I realized. Counting to a minute. The longest minute of my fucking life. Then he placed a hand on my belly, and it took everything in me not to scream. Something cold replaced his fingers and he held it there. My stomach churned and my baby reared up inside me. I was going to throw up. No, I couldn't. "That's it," he whispered to me, to no one. I realized then how I recognized the voice. Tom. It sounded just like Tom. That was all I could take. I jolted out of my sleep and upright, my eyes meeting his in the dark. Sure enough, Tom was staring back at me. I screamed at him and he raised his gloved hands. There was a stethoscope around his neck like he was cosplaying a fucking doctor. My husband shot up from the other side of the bed. For a moment him and Tom just stared at each other. Then my husband raised his voice in a way I'd never heard before. "Get out! Get out!" Tom shot out of the room quicker than I could process. My husband chased him out, his shouts and threats echoing through the house. When he came back I told him we should call the cops. He said no, that wasn't a good idea. He would deal with it. He took a bat from underneath the bed and headed out with it. I tried to stop him, but he left out the front door and didn't return till the next morning. By then I'd found the milk carton laying on its side by my fallen bedsheets. A plastic funnel on the ground next to it. I felt sick. So fucking sick to think about all that blood in Tom's fridge. My blood. I went to the bathroom and emptied my stomach till I couldn't anymore. When my husband came home, he told me he'd taken care of it. There was blood splattered on his face in the bath. He washed it off in the kitchen sink. I was silent, at a loss for words. Afterward, I watched him put locks on all the doors, draw the shades and set the alarms. "Did you kill him?" I asked. My husband just shook his head no. As he locked our bedroom window he said, "Just to be safe, okay?" For the rest of the day we cooped ourselves up inside watching movies, taking it easy as he put it. Laying low. I asked him what the hell Tom would want with cartons of blood. My husband looked wildly uncomfortable, said that men are scary, it could have been anything. Could have been selling it on the dark web, that shit makes a lot of money supposedly. He kissed my forehead and pulled me close. I asked him for the second time then if we should call the police. He didn't reply. Over the next week he told me I needed to stay home, that he'd go out for groceries, meds, etc. Almost my entire pregnancy he'd been pushing for a home birth, but now he was adamant about it. Meanwhile I was having second thoughts. What if something went wrong? What if Tom came by? Whenever I shared these concerns with my husband he got angry. Eventually, after a heated argument I asked him if he planned to keep me cooped up like a dog till I gave birth or died. He just glared at me. I said I was going to leave for a little while, give him some time to work through things. As soon as I did, he grabbed me by the arm and begged me to stay. He burst into tears, saying that everything he did for me. That he was sorry for how he'd been treating me, how he'd scared me, but he was scared, God he was scared. He asked me to stay with him. So I did. When he went to take a shower that night, I again checked our bedroom for anything Tom might have left behind. I don't know what I was expecting to find. Nothing on the floor, of course. It had been a week after all, I would have tripped over anything left over. But under the bed. Under the bed was a spool of rope. Cable ties. Duct tape. My husband and I had never participated in bondage or anything of the sort. That was my final straw. I had a horrible, horrible feeling. I called my mom and asked her if I could come over. She said of course. I tried to go out the front door but it was locked from the outside. I didn't even know that was possible. I tried the back door. Locked again. At this point I was so panicked I started to cry. I checked the kitchen window. Locked. Finally, the giant office window was open. 8 months pregnant, I hauled my ass out the window and dropped 5 feet into the garden. And I ran. Caught an Uber and made my way to my mom's place. I've been here 2 days now. I have endless missed calls from my husband. I don't know what the hell to say to him. I'm not sure if I think he's just paranoid, or if he's somehow a part of this whole thing with Tom. What the fuck should I do? Should I go back home? I don't want to give birth without my husband, but he's scaring me. Tom is a whole other problem I'm too afraid to fully confront. I'm thinking of going back home tomorrow and explaining myself to my husband, getting answers to the questions that have been plaguing me, and leaving if I need to. I don't want to do anything too drastic like call off the marriage before I know the whole story, but I guess I'm afraid to know what the hell the real story is. What do you think? Should I try and fix things before I give birth? Should I call the police? Am I the asshole for telling my brother not to make himself a sandwich while my girlfriend was cleaning the kitchen? Not the asshole, this is a throwaway account because my girlfriend wouldn't want me posting this under my regular username. My girlfriend, 35 female, and I, 36 male, are hosting my brother, 34 male, for 2 weeks because he has a training program in our city. This is the first time he stayed with us for an extended period. He usually just visits for a weekend, and after a week, I'm noticing differences in our habits regarding food, cleanliness, and helping with chores. While we're getting along, these small clashes are starting to surface. Every Saturday, my girlfriend and I spend a few hours cleaning the apartment and cooking meals for the next few days. I had hoped my brother might offer to help, but he hasn't. Instead, he went for a walk while we started cleaning, then came back and spent time on his laptop before taking a nap. At 4 p.m., he said he was hungry and asked if he could make himself a sandwich. He'd had a hot dog while he was out but had skipped lunch with us. I told him, sure, but if My girlfriend is cleaning the kitchen, maybe wait or have a banana or an apple instead. I know my girlfriend doesn't like anyone getting in her way when she's cleaning a room, and she was also on the phone with her mom at the time. Plus, I was a bit annoyed that he hadn't offered to help earlier, so the idea of him sitting down in the kitchen for a sandwich while she was working seemed rude to me. He insisted that he didn't want a banana. He wanted bread and ham. So I told him, ask, girlfriend, if it's okay, but don't be surprised if she says no. He went to the kitchen to ask her, and since she was busy cleaning and talking to her mom, she pointed him toward the fruit basket and, like me, suggested he grab a piece of fruit. He declined and returned to me, saying we were being extreme for not letting him make a sandwich and that he'd never seen anyone do this before. I didn't really have a response to that, as I thought it was completely normal to expect a guest to avoid getting in the way when someone is busy cleaning. However, my girlfriend's mom overheard the conversation over the phone and told her, "Come on, let him have his sandwich. The poor thing will starve." So my girlfriend went back and told him he could go ahead. Now I'm not sure if we were wrong to tell him no initially. Edit for clarity, I'm not expecting my brother to do a deep clean of our house. I just expect him to do the basics, like putting his own cup in the dishwasher and not leaving messes for us to clean up. I am a bit annoyed that he hasn't naturally offered to help, as I'd usually chip in if I were a guest somewhere, including at his place. For example, if I saw my host doing dishes, I'd take a dishcloth and help dry them. Or if I stayed for several days, I'd offer to cook a meal or two. However, my main question is about the specific situation of asking him not to go into the kitchen while my girlfriend was cleaning, versus his feeling that he should be able to make a sandwich whenever he wants. Not strict about his schedule, he made a sandwich in the middle of the night once and I had no issue with that. Am I the asshole for not telling my friend I'm pregnant sooner? Dear, I told my close friend I'm pregnant at 12 weeks, and she's hurt that I didn't tell her sooner. My close friend is upset with me for not sharing my pregnancy news with her earlier and because I told another friend, who has a child, before her. I told this other friend early on because I had a lot of questions, and it was helpful to have her support as someone who had been through it. Once we got our final first trimester test results at 12 weeks, I immediately told my parents and then my close friend. We have mutual friends, so I wanted her to hear it from me first, rather than from someone else. I also shared that I had experienced a miscarriage earlier in the year, which is difficult for me to talk about. She congratulated me and offered condolences for my miscarriage, but also slipped in a few passive-aggressive comments about feeling left out and how I could have told her sooner. I let it go to avoid any drama. A week later, she sent me a long text expressing how hurt she felt that I didn't tell her sooner, especially since I had told our other friend first. She said she felt like I don't trust her and that it was difficult because mutual friends had been asking her if I was pregnant, and she was out of the loop. She added that she's been crying over it and feels even more hurt that I hadn't told her about the miscarriage earlier. I'm generally a private person and don't get overly sentimental about baby stuff. It took us almost a year to conceive and my first pregnancy had a lot of spotting. I didn't want to tell many people early, except the friend who had experienced it before, in case it ended in miscarriage, which it did. I didn't want to face the discomfort of telling people, never mind, I'm not pregnant. The whole journey was stressful, and with this second pregnancy, I didn't want to share the news until all the tests came back low risk. I understand that my friend may feel like I don't trust her, but that's not the case at all. This just wasn't about her. I value my privacy and talking about the miscarriage is painful. I wish she could respect that instead of feeling hurt by it. While her feelings are valid, I also wish she had vented to someone else instead of to me. It's cast a shadow over my pregnancy announcement, and the more I think about it, the more I feel annoyed that she's made my pregnancy about her. Am I being unreasonable? Am I the asshole for not attending a wedding, then purchasing a family home? A little over a year ago, my brother passed away. Some of my relatives chose to skip his funeral to attend a bridal shower. Later, they asked me to photograph their wedding and to bring a specific, expensive dish. This would have required traveling over 7 hours to get there. I declined their request, and since then, they've been critical of my recent decision to purchase my grandmother's home, accusing me of being selfish. For context, I have already invested over $15,000 into repairs and improvements on the house, and the entire family agreed on the sale price before I started any work on it. Edit to clarify, they wanted me to spend a significant amount on their wedding, which I didn't. Now I'm investing an even larger sum into the house. They're upset because they would prefer to access that money through inheritance. Now that I've put so much into the home, they would benefit financially if the house's sale price were to increase. they'd gain not only the agreed sale amount but also the money I've put into repairs and any increased market value. Currently, the home isn't at full market value yet, but it's in better condition due to my efforts, and they haven't contributed any time or effort to the repair process. When I told them I could stop the repairs and they could find another buyer, but they'd need to reimburse me the $15,000 I've invested, they brought up my refusal to cover certain wedding and honeymoon expenses. Am I the asshole for not attending a wedding, then purchasing a family home? A little over a year ago, my brother passed away. Some of my relatives chose to skip his funeral to attend a bridal shower. Later, they asked me to photograph their wedding and to bring a specific, expensive dish. This would have required traveling over 7 hours to get there. I declined their request, and since then, they've been critical of my recent decision to purchase my grandmother's home, accusing me of being selfish. For context, I have already invested over $15,000 into repairs and improvements on the house, and the entire family agreed on the sale price before I started any work on it. Edit to clarify, they wanted me to spend a significant amount on their wedding, which I didn't. Now I'm investing an even larger sum into the house. They're upset because they would prefer to access that money through inheritance. Now that I've put so much into the home, they would benefit financially if the house's sale price were to increase. They'd gain not only the agreed sale amount but also the money I've put into repairs and any increased market value. Currently, the home isn't at full market value yet, but it's in better condition due to my efforts, and they haven't contributed any time or effort to the repair process. When I told them I could stop the repairs and they could find another buyer, but they'd need to reimburse me the $15,000 I've invested, they brought up my refusal to cover certain wedding and honeymoon expenses.